Hide in the fitting room, the bridal shop owner whispered before my daughter's wedding. 10 minutes later, what I heard through the wall left me frozen in place. My daughter's fiancé walked in, but he was not alone, and he was certainly not there to try on a tuxedo. I heard the sound of a zipper, a woman's giggle, and then a conversation that turned my blood into ice. They were talking about me, they were talking about my property, and they were laughing about how easy it was to fool a stupid old man and his desperate daughter. I stood there in the dark, my fists clenched so hard my knuckles turned white. I could have stepped out and ended it right there with my bare hands. But I didn't. Instead, I listened. I listened to every single word of their plan to destroy my life. And in that dark fitting room, the loving father died and a ruthless businessman was reborn. I am Frank Robinson, 68 years old, and for 40 years I have had grease under my fingernails and oil stains on my work boots. To the world, and even to my own daughter Jasmine, I am just a retired mechanic who got lucky with a piece of junk land on the edge of town. They see a simple man who counts coupons and drives a 20-year-old pickup truck. They do not know that the junk land is actually a licensed industrial recycling facility worth $20 million. They do not know that I own the company, not just the land. I let them underestimate me because silence is power. But last week, that silence became my only weapon. Before I tell you how I turned their own greed into a noose around their necks, let me know which city you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to watch someone lie to your face while you knew the whole ugly truth. It started on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 days before the wedding. I went to see Mrs. Patterson. She has run the same small tailoring shop on 4th Street since before I met my late wife. The shop smells of steam iron mothballs and old lavender perfume. It is a smell that usually calms me down, but that day the air felt heavy. Mrs. Patterson was not smiling. She usually greets me with a hug and asks about my bad knee, but this time she looked pale. Her hands were shaking as she smoothed out the lapel of my old charcoal suit. It was the same suit I wore to my wife's funeral, and I wanted to wear it to walk Jasmine down the aisle. "Frank, you are early," she said, her voice tight. I told her I just wanted to make sure the inseam was right. I was happy. I was humming a little tune. My little girl was marrying into the Harrington family. They were high society people, real estate developers. I thought Jasmine had finally found the security I always wanted for her. But Mrs. Patterson grabbed my arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong for a woman in her 70s. "Get in the back," she hissed. I looked at her confused. I asked her what was wrong. "Don't ask questions, Frank. Just get in the fitting room, now. And whatever you do, do not make a sound. Do not come out until I tell you. Trust me." There was a desperation in her eyes that scared me. I have known this woman for 30 years. She is not prone to drama. So I did as she asked. I stepped into the cramped fitting room at the back of the shop and pulled the heavy velvet curtain shut. I stood there in the semi-darkness, smelling the dust, feeling ridiculous. I was a grown man hiding in a changing stall. 2 minutes later, the front doorbell chimed. I expected a customer, maybe a bride having a meltdown, but the voices I heard made my stomach drop. It was Blake, my future son-in-law, the man who had sat at my dinner table 2 nights ago and called me sir, but he was not using his polite voice now. "God, this place is a dump," Blake said. His voice was loud, arrogant. "Why did we have to come here, Courtney? Courtney." My heart hammered against my ribs. Courtney was Jasmine's best friend, her maid of honor. They had been inseparable since kindergarten. Jasmine had chosen Courtney to stand right beside her at the altar. I heard the click of the front door locking. Because Blake Courtney purred and her voice was different, too husky and low. Old Mrs. Patterson is deaf as a post in her back room, and this is the only place in town where your mother won't catch us. Plus, I love the thrill. I stood paralyzed. Mrs. Patterson must have been standing behind the counter pretending not to hear, or maybe she had slipped into the back office to give them space just to let me hear this. I heard the rustle of fabric, a heavy sigh, the wet, unmistakable sound of a kiss. It went on for too long. I stared at my reflection in the fitting room mirror. An old man in a work shirt, eyes wide with horror. My daughter was at home right now, probably writing her vows while her fiancé was making out with her best friend in a dusty tailor shop. So Blake said, pulling away, "Are we all set for Saturday?" "I am ready if you are," Courtney giggled. "But are you sure you can go through with it? Kissing her at the altar? It is going to make me sick watching you play the loving husband." Blake laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "It is just a performance, babe. Just a performance. Think of the prize. Think of the land. The land." My ears started ringing. "The old man is clueless," Blake continued. I heard him pacing around the small shop floor. He thinks I am doing him a favor by taking his daughter off his hands. He has no idea that pile of dirt he lives on is the only thing saving my family from bankruptcy. I leaned closer to the curtain, hardly daring to breathe. My mother ran the numbers, Blake said. Once we get married, I will get him to sign the deed over as a wedding gift. He is desperate for Jasmine to be taken care of. He would sign his own death warrant if I told him it would help her. As soon as the ink is dry, we sell it to the developers for the tech park. 20 million, Courtney. That clears the Harrington debt and leaves us with enough cash to disappear to Europe. And what about Jasmine? Courtney asked. She did not sound worried for her friend. She sounded jealous. Blake scoffed. Jasmine. Please. She is a prop. She is so desperate to be a Harrington she will believe anything. Once the land is sold, I will file for divorce. I give it 6 months. I will tell her it is not working out. I will throw her a few $1,000s to keep her quiet, and she will be back in that trailer park or wherever her dad crawled out of. I felt a physical blow to my chest. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the contempt. They looked at my daughter, my beautiful, ambitious Jasmine, and they saw nothing but a pawn. They looked at me and they saw a stupid, senile mechanic they could strip for parts. Courtney laughed meanly. She is going to be so heartbroken. She really thinks you love her soul. I love her dad's real estate portfolio, Blake said. Come here. Let me show you how much I love you. The sounds that followed were sickening. I put my hands over my ears, but I could not block out the truth. My knees felt weak. I wanted to rip the curtain open. I wanted to grab Blake by his expensive designer collar and smash his face into the mirror. I wanted to scream so loud it shattered the windows. I imagined dragging him out to the street and showing the world what a monster he was. But then a cold clarity washed over me. If I walked out there now, what would happen? A fight, a scandal. The wedding would be called off. Jasmine would be devastated, crying on my shoulder. But Blake, he would just walk away. He would spin a story. He would say I was a crazy, violent old man. He would find another victim. And the Harrington family would still be looking down on us, laughing at how they almost got away with it. No, violence was too easy. A punch in the face heals in a few weeks. I wanted to give him a scar that would last forever. I looked at my hands. These were hands that could fix any engine, hands that could take apart a transmission and put it back together blindfolded. I knew how to build things, but I also knew how to dismantle them, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. I waited. It felt like hours, but it was probably only 10 minutes. Finally, they fixed their clothes. See you at the rehearsal dinner, babe, Blake said. Try not to look too guilty. Never, Courtney replied. The bell chimed again. The door opened and closed. Silence returned to the shop. The velvet curtain was whipped open. Mrs. Patterson stood there. Her face was grim, her eyes full of tears. She didn't say a word. She just looked at me, waiting to see if I was going to break. I stepped out of the fitting room. My legs were steady now. The trembling had stopped. I walked over to the counter where my old charcoal suit was waiting. I ran my hand over the fabric. Did you hear them? Mrs. Patterson whispered. I heard them, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, low, gravelly. Are you going to tell Jasmine? Are you going to call the police? I looked at Mrs. Patterson. I looked at the mirror where Blake had just been preening. No, I said. Frank, you can't let her marry him. I turned to her. I am not going to let her stay married to him. But the wedding is going to happen. Mrs. Patterson looked confused. Frank, why? Because I said buttoning my cuffs. If I stop this now, I'd just save her from a bad breakup. But if I let this play out, I can save the whole town from the Harringtons. They want my land, fine. I will invite them onto my land. They want a show, I will give them a show. I took a $20 bill from my wallet and placed it on the counter for the fitting. Make sure the suit is ready for Friday, Mrs. Patterson, and I need you to do me one favor. Anything, Frank. That security camera in the corner, I pointed to the blinking red light above the door. Does it record audio? Yes, she nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. It records everything. Good, I said. Burn it onto a drive for me. I have a speech to write. I walked out of the shop into the bright afternoon sun. The world looked the same, but everything had changed. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a hunter. And the Harringtons had just walked into the wrong part of the forest. The venue for the rehearsal dinner was a place called the Gilded Lily. It was the kind of restaurant where they did not put prices on the menu because if you had to ask, you clearly could not afford it. The air inside smelled of truffles and expensive perfume and old money. I walked up to the heavy oak doors wearing my charcoal suit. The same suit Mrs. Patterson had pressed for me earlier that day. It was clean, but the fabric was thin from years of wear and the style was at least 2 decades out of date. I knew I looked out of place. That was exactly the point. I wanted them to see the mechanic. I wanted them to see the poor old man. I wanted them to feel safe in their arrogance. The hostess was a young woman with a tight bun and a look of permanent disdain. She looked at my scuffed work boots, which I had polished as best I could, and then up to my frayed collar. She did not even smile. "Deliveries around the back," she said, without looking up from her reservation book. Her voice was flat and dismissive. I stood my ground. "I am not a delivery man," I said, keeping my voice calm and low. "I am Frank Robinson. I am the father of the bride." The young woman looked up then. Her eyes widened slightly, not with apology, but with a sort of pitying shock. She looked me up and down one more time as if trying to figure out how someone like me could be related to the people in the private dining room. "Right," she said. "Follow me." She walked fast as if she wanted to get me out of the main dining room as quickly as possible so I would not offend the other guests. I walked past tables full of people eating food that cost more than my monthly electric bill. I felt their eyes on me. I heard the whispers. I saw a man in a tuxedo nudge his wife and point at my jacket. I kept my head high. I have walked through scrap yards full of jagged metal and broken glass. A few nasty looks from people who have never done a day of hard labor in their lives were not going to hurt me. We reached the private room at the back. It was glass-walled and overlooked the city skyline. The table was set with crystal glasses that sparkled under the chandeliers. The entire Harrington clan was there. Victoria Harrington sat at the head of the table like a queen on her throne. She was wearing a silver dress that looked like it was made of liquid money, and her neck was draped in diamonds that were probably bought with loans she had no intention of paying back. Blake was next to her, laughing at something she said. And there was Jasmine, my little girl. She looked beautiful in a cream cocktail dress, but she looked tense. Her eyes were darting around the room, checking the exits, checking the waiters, checking everything except her father. When I stepped into the room, the conversation stopped dead. It was as if someone had cut the power to a radio. Victoria turned slowly in her chair. Her eyes raked over me from head to toe. She did not stand up. She did not offer a hand. She just smiled, a thin, tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Oh, Frank," she said, "you made it. And you dressed up. How quaint." I walked over to the table. "Good evening, Victoria," I said. I pulled out the chair next to Jasmine, but before I could sit down, Victoria spoke again. Her voice was loud enough for the waiters to hear. "Is that the same suit you wore to the engagement party, Frank? I recognize that patch on the elbow. It is very rustic. It almost looks like a costume. Are you planning to do some gardening after dinner?" A few of the Harrington cousins snickered. Blake covered his mouth to hide a smirk. I looked down at the patch. It was a small repair Mrs. Patterson had made 5 years ago. "It is a good suit," I said quietly. "I wore it to my wife's funeral. It means a lot to me." The room went silent again, but it was not a respectful silence. It was an awkward, uncomfortable silence. Victoria waved her hand in the air, dismissing my words as if they were a bad smell. "Oh, please, Frank, let us not bring down the mood with talk of funerals. We are here to celebrate, though honestly, looking at you, I feel like we should be taking up a collection." She laughed, a tinkling, glassy sound. "Tell you what, after the wedding, I will send you the number of Blake Taylor. We cannot have you looking like the help in the wedding photos. It ruins the aesthetic." I felt a flash of heat in my chest. It was not shame. It was anger, pure hot anger. I looked at Jasmine. I waited for her to say something. I waited for her to tell Victoria to stop. I waited for her to defend the man who had worked double shifts for 20 years to pay for her piano lessons and her college tuition. Jasmine looked at me. Her face was red. She looked down at her plate. "Mom is right, Dad," she mumbled. Her voice was so quiet I almost missed it. "You really should have bought a new suit. You know how important appearances are to the Harringtons. You look." She paused, searching for a word that would not sound too cruel. "You look tired." That hurt more than anything Victoria could have said. My own daughter was ashamed of me. She was ashamed of the sweat and the grease and the sacrifices that had built the foundation she was standing on. I slowly pushed the chair back in. "I am sorry I embarrass you, Jasmine," I said. I did not mean to ruin your aesthetic. Victoria clapped her hands together. Well, now that that is settled, let us sit. But Frank, dear, there has been a slight change in the seating plan. I looked at the table. There were name cards at every place setting. I saw my name. It was not next to Jasmine. It was not even at the main table. Jasmine stood up then. She walked over to me and took my arm, pulling me slightly away from the group. She smelled of expensive champagne and fear. Dad, she whispered, please do not make a scene. But the investors are here tonight. Mr. Sterling and his wife. They are the ones funding Blake's new project. I looked at her. What does that have to do with me, Jasmine? She bit her lip. She could not look me in the eye. Well, they are very particular people. Victoria thought it would be better if the head table was reserved for the business partners and the immediate Harrington family. You know, to talk strategy. I am the father of the bride, Jasmine, I said. I am immediate family. I know, Dad, I know. She squeezed my arm and her nails dug into my skin. But you do not know anything about real estate or finance. You would be bored. And honestly, you would stick out. We set up a nice table for you over there. She pointed. In the far corner of the room near the swinging double doors that led to the kitchen, there was a small round table. It was set for one. It was the kind of table they put in for a last-minute guest or a child who could not be trusted with the adults. It was in the shadows. You want me to sit in the corner? I asked, like a dog. It is just for tonight, Dad, Jasmine pleaded. Please, do it for me. If this dinner goes well, Blake gets the funding and we are set for life. Do not ruin this for me. I looked at that small table. Then I looked at the head table where Blake was pouring wine for a fat man in a tuxedo. They were laughing. They were celebrating the money they were going to make, the money they thought they were going to get from selling my land. They wanted me in the corner so I would not hear their lies. They wanted me invisible. Okay, Jasmine, I said. I will sit there. Thank you, Daddy. She breathed a sigh of relief. She kissed my cheek, but her lips felt cold. You are the best. She went back to the head table and sat down next to Blake. He whispered something in her ear and she giggled. She did not look back at me. I walked over to the small table by the kitchen doors. A waiter bumped into me with a tray of appetizers and muttered a quick sorry without stopping. I sat down. From my vantage point, I could see the whole room, but nobody was looking at me. I was a ghost. I watched the waiters pour the wine. I watched Victoria hold court, telling stories that made everyone laugh. I watched Blake charm the investors. I watched my daughter pretend to be someone she was not. The waiter finally came to my table. He looked confused to see someone sitting alone in the dark. Can I get you a drink, sir? He asked. Water, I said. Just water. I sat there for 2 hours. I ate the cold soup they brought me. I watched them toast to family and to the future. I watched them toast to the Harrington legacy. They raised their glasses of $200 scotch and drank to their own greed. They had no idea that the man sitting in the shadows, the man in the cheap suit with the patched elbow, held the deed to their salvation in his pocket. And they had no idea that he was about to set it on fire. I took a sip of my water. It tasted like metal. I looked at Jasmine one last time. She was glowing, basking in the attention of the rich and powerful. She had made her choice. She had chosen the illusion over the reality. She had chosen the Harringtons over her father. My heart hardened in my chest. It turned into a cold, heavy stone. I was done being the embarrassment. I was done being the tired old mechanic. If they wanted to treat me like a stranger, I would show them what a stranger could do. I reached into my jacket pocket and touched the small digital recorder I always carried for site inspections. I had turned it on the moment I walked into the room. I had recorded every insult. I had recorded Victoria calling me a gardener. I had recorded Jasmine banishing me to the corner. I have everything I need, I whispered to myself. Blake stood up to make a toast. He raised his glass towards the corner of the room where I was sitting. To my future father-in-law he shouted, and his voice was thick with fake affection. Thank you for raising such a beautiful daughter. We are going to take great care of her, Frank. Do not you worry. The room applauded. Jasmine beamed. Victoria clapped politely. I raised my water glass in return. I did not smile. I did not stand. I just stared at Blake until he looked away uncomfortable. Enjoy the champagne, son, I thought. Enjoy it while you can, because tomorrow you are going to choke on it. I placed the glass down on the table. The water rippled. A storm was coming, and I was going to be the lightning. The waiter had just cleared my bowl of cold soup when the atmosphere in the private dining room shifted. The laughter at the head table died down, and I saw Blake whisper something to Jasmine. She nodded, her face pale, and turned her attention to her dessert plate as if the tiramisu was the most fascinating thing in the world. She could not watch what was about to happen. She knew, and she let it happen anyway. That was the moment the last thread of my hope snapped. Blake stood up. He buttoned his Italian suit jacket and picked up a black leather folder. He walked across the room toward my small table in the corner. His walk was different now. It was not the strut of a rooster. It was the prowl of a wolf closing in on a wounded animal. He pulled up a chair and sat down close to me, too close. He smelled of expensive scotch and mint breath mints, the scent of a man trying to cover up his rot. "Hey, Dad," Blake said. His voice was dripping with a syrup so sweet it made my teeth ache. "I hope you enjoyed the soup. Sorry about the seating arrangements. You know how Mother gets about protocol." I looked at him. I looked at the folder in his hand. "It is fine, Blake," I said. "I am just a simple man. I do not need a view." "Exactly," Blake said, and he patted my shoulder. His hand felt heavy and condescending. "That is what I love about you, Frank. You are practical. You understand the value of simplicity. And that is actually why I wanted to talk to you privately for a moment." He opened the leather folder. Inside there was a document on thick cream-colored paper. It looked official. It looked important. It looked like a death sentence. "Jasmine and I have been talking," Blake continued, his eyes locked on mine. "We are worried about you, Frank. You are getting older. That property of yours, the scrap yard, it is a lot of work. It is dangerous. There are chemicals and heavy machinery. We do not want you straining yourself in your golden years." I kept my face blank. I forced my hands to rest quietly on the table, even though they wanted to wrap around his throat. "I manage," I said. "It is my home." "Of course it is," Blake said quickly. "And it always will be. But we want to take the burden off your shoulders. This paperwork here, it is just a formality. It puts the property into a family trust. Jasmine and I will handle the taxes, the maintenance, the legal headaches. You just live there and relax. You will be the beneficiary, of course, but we will do the heavy lifting. It is our gift to you." He uncapped a heavy black pen. It was a Mont Blanc. I recognized it because I have a collection of fountain pens at home that would make his look like a cheap toy. He held it out to me. "Just sign right there at the bottom, Dad. Let us take care of you." I reached out and took the pen. My hand was shaking. I did not have to fake the tremor. The rage inside me was vibrating through my bones, making my muscles twitch. I pulled the document closer. I squinted, acting the part of the failing old man. "I should read it first," I mumbled. I patted my pockets. I seemed to have left my reading glasses in the truck. Blake stiffened. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Oh, come on, Frank. It is standard legal jargon. Boring stuff. You do not need to read the fine print. You trust me, do not you. You trust Jasmine." I looked over his shoulder. Victoria Harrington had appeared behind him like a silent ghost. She placed a hand on the back of Blake's chair. Her diamond rings glittered in the dim light. "Is there a problem, Frank?" she asked. Her voice was ice cold. "Are you refusing a gift from your children? After everything we have done to welcome you into this family?" "I am not refusing," I said, my voice trembling. I do not usually sign things I cannot read." Victoria sighed, a loud, impatient sound. "It is a management trust, Frank. Do not be paranoid. Unless, of course, you do not want Jasmine to have security. Unless you want her to struggle like you did." "Is that it? Do you want your daughter to suffer because of your stubborn pride?" The guilt trip. It was a classic move. They knew exactly where to hit me. They knew I would do anything for Jasmine. Or at least the version of me they thought they knew would do anything. I looked down at the document. My vision was perfectly fine. I saw the words clearly. Quitclaim deed. Grantor Frank Robinson. Grantee the Harrington Family Trust. Consideration $1. They were not managing it. They were taking it for $1. They were stealing my life work, my $20 million legacy for the price of a vending machine soda. I looked at Jasmine again. She was still staring at her dessert. She was not eating. She was waiting for the sound of the pen on paper. She was waiting for her payday. "Okay," I said softly. I dropped my shoulders, appearing to defeat. "I do not want to be a burden. I want Jasmine to be happy." "Good man," Blake said. He tapped the signature line with his finger. "Right there. Press hard. It is a carbon copy. I positioned the pen. I took a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth. I thought about Lucille. I thought about the day we bought that land. It was a swamp back then. We cleared it with our own hands. We built the first shed. We sorted the first load of copper wire. She believed in me when no one else did. If she were here, she would probably slap Blake into next week. But she was not here. I was. And I had to play the long game. I touched the pen to the paper. I started to write. Frank. I paused. My legal name is Franklin Thelonious Robinson. Every legal document, every business contract, every bank account I own requires that full signature. Without it, the document is contestable. Without it, this piece of paper is just a fancy napkin. But for them, I gave them Frank. And then I made my move. I added a last name, Robinson. But I did something I have practiced for years to catch dishonest suppliers. On the final N of Robinson, I added a small extra loop at the end, a flourish that looks like a mistake, like a slip of the hand. It is a specific mark I use that signals to my lawyers and my bank that a signature was made under duress or is not valid. It is my silent alarm. I finished the signature and let the pen drag slightly, creating a messy ink blot. I lifted the pen and looked at it as if I was confused by my own clumsiness. "Oops," I said. My hand slipped. "Is that okay?" Blake snatched the paper from under my hand before the ink was even dry. He did not even look at me. He stared at the signature, his eyes wide with greed. He blew on the ink. "It is perfect," he said. His voice was breathless. "Absolutely perfect." He closed the folder with a sharp snap. The sound echoed in the room like a gunshot. He stood up. He did not offer to shake my hand. He did not say thank you. He turned his back to me and looked at his mother. "Done," he said. Victoria clapped her hands together once. "Excellent." Then the transformation happened. It was instantaneous. The mask of the polite son-in-law fell away, and the monster underneath revealed itself. Blake looked down at me. He did not see a father anymore. He saw a discarded wrapper. "You can go now," Blake said. I blinked. I stayed in my chair. What I asked? I said, "You can go." Blake repeated louder this time. "We have some family business to discuss." "Actual business. You would not understand it." "But I have not finished my water," I said. I wanted to see how far he would go. Blake laughed. It was a cruel barking sound. "Take the water with you. In fact, take the bread basket too. I know you people hate to waste food." He snapped his fingers at a passing waiter. "Get this man a doggy bag, and call him a cab. He is leaving." Victoria looked at me with a sneer. "Do try not to linger in the lobby, Frank. It scares the other guests." I stood up slowly. My knees cracked. I let them see the frailty. I let them see the defeat. I picked up the bread roll from my plate and wrapped it in a napkin. I put it in my pocket. "Thank you for dinner," I said. "I will see you at the wedding." Blake did not answer. He was already pouring champagne for the investors, waving the folder in the air like a trophy. We just secured the asset he was boasting. The land is ours. Groundbreaking starts Monday. I turned and walked toward the kitchen doors. I did not look back at Jasmine. I did not want to see her relief. I walked through the swinging doors into the noise and heat of the kitchen. The chefs yelled orders. The dishwashers sprayed hot water. It smelled of grease and garlic. It smelled like work. It smelled like home. I walked out the back exit into the alleyway. The night air was cool. I took a deep breath, clearing the scent of expensive cologne from my lungs. I reached into my pocket and took out the bread roll. I tossed it into a dumpster. Then I took out my phone. I dialed a number I knew by heart. "Hello?" A voice answered on the first ring. It was Anthony, my lawyer. "It is done," I said. My voice was steady now. The tremor was gone. "Did they take the bait?" Anthony asked. "Hook, line, and sinker," I said. "They have the paper." I signed it with the distress marker. "Good," Anthony said. "I will file the injunction tomorrow morning. By the time they try to register that deed, the trap will already be sprung." "Are you okay, Frank?" I looked up at the moon. It was full and bright, shining down on the city. I thought about the man I used to be, the man who just wanted to fix cars and raise a family. That man was gone. "I am fine, Anthony," I said. "I am better than fine. I am ready." I hung up the phone. I walked down the alleyway, my footsteps echoing on the pavement. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I had the truth. And in 48 hours, everyone else would have it too. The Harringtons thought they had just won the lottery. They had no idea they had just signed their own confession. The war had begun, and I was the only one who knew the battlefield. I drove my battered pickup truck to the posh apartment complex where Jasmine lived. It was raining hard, a cold, relentless rain that washed the grime off the city streets but could not wash away the feeling of dread sitting heavy in my stomach. The building was all glass and steel, towering over the neighborhood like a monument to excess. The valet looked at my truck with a sneer, but I ignored him. I was on a mission. I needed to see her. Even after the fitting room, even after the dinner, even after the signature, I still had a tiny flickering flame of hope burning in my chest. I was a father, and fathers are programmed to find excuses for their children. Maybe Blake was forcing her. Maybe she was scared. Maybe underneath the designer clothes and the fake smile, my little girl was trapped screaming for help. I needed to look into her eyes one last time without the Harringtons watching. I needed to give her a chance to confess. In my pocket, I carried a small velvet box. Inside was her mother brooch. It was not a diamond, it was a simple silver piece shaped like a dove with small pearls for eyes. Lucille had worn it on our wedding day. She had worn it when she held Jasmine for the first time. It was the most precious thing I owned, not because of its monetary value, but because it held the soul of our family. I wanted to give it to Jasmine before the wedding. I wanted to remind her of who she came from. I wanted to remind her that she was made of love, not ambition. I took the elevator up to the penthouse floor. The hallway was silent, lined with plush carpet that swallowed the sound of my work boots. I walked toward door number 402. My hand was trembling as I reached for the doorbell. I rehearsed what I would say. I would tell her I loved her. I would tell her she did not have to go through with this if she was unhappy. I would offer her an out. But just as my finger hovered over the button, I heard a voice. It was Jasmine. She was laughing. It was not the nervous, forced laugh she had used at dinner. It was a loud, free, unburdened laugh. "Oh my God, Courtney, stop it," Jasmine said. Her voice carried clearly through the expensive mahogany door. "You are going to make me pee my pants." I froze. My hand dropped to my side. I leaned closer to the wood. "I am serious," Jasmine continued. "You should have seen his face when he signed that paper. He looked like a confused puppy. He actually thought we were doing him a favor." "I do not want to be a burden." Can you believe he said that? It was pathetic. I felt a sharp pain in my chest as if a rib had snapped. He is so desperate for approval. Courtney, it is actually sad. He has spent his whole life rolling around in garbage, and he thinks that by signing it over, he is finally buying his way into respectability. He has no idea we are going to bulldoze that ugly shed he calls a home the second the ink is dry. I closed my eyes. Tears pricked at the corners, but I willed them away. But Jazz Courtney voice replied, muffled but audible. "Are you sure you are okay with putting him in a home? I mean, he is your dad." Jasmine scoffed. A sound so full of disdain it made me physically ill. "A home is too good for him. We found this place called Whispering Pines about 2 hours north. It is basically a warehouse for state cases. It is cheap, it is far away, and they have a strict no visitation policy if you pay extra. Which I definitely will. I cannot have him showing up at the new house smelling like motor oil and cheap soap. It is embarrassing." She paused and I could hear the clinking of glass. She was drinking. She was celebrating. Besides, she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "He has served his purpose. He raised me. He paid for school. And now he has given me the ticket to the big leagues. That is what parents are for, right? To be used until they are empty. I am just speeding up the process. Once Blake and I sell the land, I will never have to admit I came from a scrapyard again. I will be a Harrington. And Frank Robinson will just be a tax write-off." The flame in my chest went out. It did not flicker. It did not fade. It was extinguished, instantly drowned by the cold bucket of reality. I stood there in the hallway for a long time. The silence that followed her words was deafening. I looked at the door. It was just a piece of wood, but it felt like an iron wall separating two different worlds. On one side was a monster who viewed people as commodities. On my side was a man who had just realized he had been loving a ghost. My daughter Jasmine, the little girl with pigtails who used to cry when she stepped on a bug, she was gone. Maybe she had been gone for a long time and I was just too blind to see it. The woman in that apartment was a stranger, a cruel calculation wearing my daughter's face. She was not a victim. She was the architect. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box. The silver dove gleamed under the hallway lights. It looked innocent. It looked pure. It belonged to a memory. It belonged to Lucille and the dreams we had built together. It did not belong to Jasmine. Giving this to her now would be an insult to her mother memory. It would be like throwing a pearl into a sewer. I looked down the hallway. There was a trash chute near the elevator, a sleek metal door set into the wall. I walked over to it. My steps were heavy, but steady. I did not feel the crushing weight of sadness anymore. I felt a strange numbness, a hollowness where my heart used to be. I opened the trash chute. The smell of garbage wafted up, stale and rotting. It was the smell of things that were broken, things that were used up, things that were no longer wanted. Jasmine wanted to treat me like garbage. She wanted to throw me away like a used part. I held the velvet box over the dark abyss. "Goodbye, Jasmine," I whispered. I did not say it with anger. I said it with the finality of a judge reading a sentence. I let go. The box tumbled into the darkness. I listened. Clang, clang, thud. It was gone. It was mixed in with the coffee grounds and the old newspapers and the refuse of the wealthy. I turned around and walked back to the elevator. I pressed the button. When the doors opened, I stepped inside and caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. The man staring back at me did not look like a confused puppy. He did not look like a victim. His eyes were dry. His jaw was set. He looked like a man who had just cleared the last piece of debris from a construction site. The father was dead. He had died in that hallway right along with the memory of the little girl he loved. Now only the businessman remained, and the businessman had a wedding to attend. I walked out of the building into the rain. I let the water soak my shirt. I let it wash away the last traces of the man I used to be. I got into my truck and started the engine. It roared to life, a powerful, angry sound. "I am coming for you," I said to the windshield. I drove away, leaving my heart in the trash chute and taking my wrath to the altar. The Harringtons wanted a show. They wanted a tragedy. I was going to give them a masterpiece. I drove away from Jasmine's apartment building and headed toward the industrial district. This was the part of the city most people avoided. It was loud and smelled of diesel and wet concrete. It was my territory. I pulled my truck up to a rusted chain-link fence with a sign that said Robinson Scrap and Salvage. To the outside world, it looked like a graveyard for old tires and rusted metal beams. But when I punched the code into the security pad, the gate slid open silently, revealing a paved road that led to a massive warehouse at the back of the lot. I parked the truck and walked to the steel door. A scanner read my retina, and the lock disengaged with a heavy thud. Inside, the air was cool and filtered. It did not smell of garbage. It smelled of ozone and money. This was the nerve center of Robinson Logistics. Rows of servers hummed in the darkness, tracking shipping containers and recycling contracts across 3 states. In the center of the room sat a glass-walled office. Inside, a man was waiting for me. Anthony was the only person in the world besides my accountant who knew exactly how much I was worth. He was a sharp lawyer with a shark smile and a mind like a calculator. He had been urging me for years to stop playing the poor mechanic and start living like the CEO I was. I had always refused because I wanted Jasmine to stay grounded. What a joke that turned out to be. Anthony stood up as I walked in. He did not ask how the dinner went. He took one look at my face and he knew. He poured 2 glasses of expensive bourbon and slid one across the mahogany desk. So Anthony said quietly, taking a sip, "We are finally doing this." "We are doing it," I said. I did not touch the drink. "I want everything, Anthony. I want to know every cent they owe. I want to know who holds their mortgage. I want to know who leases their cars. I want to know how much they owe on their credit cards." Anthony smiled and tapped a key on his laptop. The large screen on the wall flickered to life. It displayed the financial anatomy of the Harrington family. It was a disaster. It was a sea of red ink. "They are drowning," Frank Anthony explained, pointing at the charts. "The Harrington development firm is leveraged to the hilt. They owe $12 million to the bank for a project in the suburbs that stalled 2 years ago. They have missed their last 3 mortgage payments on the family estate. Victoria Harrington has maxed out 5 credit cards to keep up appearances. They are technically insolvent. The only reason the bank has not foreclosed yet is because Blake promised them a massive injection of capital." "My land," I said. Exactly. Anthony nodded. They showed the bank the projected value of your property. They claimed it was a done deal. That is the collateral keeping the wolves at the door. If that deal falls through, they lose everything. The house, the cars, the company. I looked at the numbers. I looked at the desperate, precarious house of cards they had built. They were not rich. They were just better actors than I was. Buy the debt, I said. Anthony raised an eyebrow. All of it. Every single dime, I said, my voice flat and cold. Call the bank first thing in the morning. Tell them Robinson Logistics wants to purchase the Harrington note. Offer them full value in cash. The bank will be happy to get that toxic asset off their books. By noon on Saturday, I want to be the one holding the mortgage on their mansion. I want to be the one they owe for the clothes on their backs. Anthony typed furiously, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He looked like a pianist playing a symphony of destruction. And the deed, Anthony asked without looking up. The one you signed tonight. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled napkin I had wrapped the bread roll in. I tossed it in the trash. Then I pulled out a copy of the signature I had snapped a photo of with my phone before Blake took it away. I signed it, Frank, I said, pointing to the screen, and I used the distress marker on the last N. Anthony laughed, a short, sharp sound of pure appreciation. The distress loop. I have not seen you use that since the union negotiations of '98, so the document is invalid on its face, but they do not know that. Not yet, I said. Let them think they have won. Let them think the land is theirs. I want them to feel the victory. I want them to taste it, because it will make the fall so much harder. When I stand up at that wedding, I do not want to just stop a sale. I want to foreclose on their entire existence. Anthony hit a final key and closed the laptop. The purchase order is prepped, Frank. I will execute it at 9 a.m. sharp. By the time they are saying, I do, you will own the roof over their heads. He stood up and walked over to a tall wardrobe in the corner of the office. Now, he said, opening the doors. We need to address the other matter. You cannot destroy an empire looking like a retiree. Mrs. Patterson sent this over an hour ago. She said you would be needing it. He pulled out a garment bag and unzipped it. Inside hung a tuxedo. But it was not just any tuxedo. It was midnight blue silk with a shawl collar cut from Italian fabric that cost more than Blake Carr. It was sleek. It was powerful. It was the kind of suit a man wears when he owns the room. I took off my old work jacket. I took off the flannel shirt I had worn to the dinner. I stripped down to my undershirt right there in the office. I felt like I was shedding a skin. The humble father, the patient mechanic, the man who apologized for existing. I threw those clothes into the corner. I put on the crisp white dress shirt. The cufflinks were solid gold squares, simple and heavy. I stepped into the trousers. They fit perfectly. Mrs. Patterson had known. She had always known this day would come. Finally, I put on the jacket. It settled onto my shoulders like a suit of armor. I walked over to the reflection in the glass window. The man staring back at me was not Frank. He was Mr. Robinson. He stood tall. His shoulders were broad. His eyes were hard and clear. There was no apology in his stance. There was only power. Anthony came up behind me and straightened my tie. You look like the devil, Frank, he said admiringly. No, I said, adjusting my cuffs. The devil makes deals. I am not here to make a deal. I am here to collect. I turned away from the window. I was ready. The plan was set. The trap was baited. The Harringtons were sleeping soundly in their beds, dreaming of my money. They did not know that the man they called a gardener was coming to pull them out by the roots. I walked out of the office, leaving the old Frank on the floor with the dust. The engine of war was running, and I was behind the wheel. The wedding was in 2 days, and it was going to be a funeral for their greed. The wedding took place at the Harrington family estate. It was a sprawling, manicured property that looked like something out of a magazine for European royalty. There were white peacocks roaming the lawn and a string quartet playing Mozart near the rose garden. Every petal, every chair, every ribbon shouted money. But as I drove my rental car up the long gravel driveway, I knew the truth. I knew that the peacocks were rented. I knew the musicians had not been paid in 3 months. And I knew that the bank had sent a foreclosure notice that was currently buried in a drawer in Blake's study. The entire scene was a beautiful lie. I parked the car away from the valet stand. I did not want anyone opening my door. I wanted to make this entrance on my own terms. I stepped out into the afternoon sun. The air was warm, but I felt cool. The midnight blue tuxedo fitted me like a second skin. The silk lapels caught the light. My shoes were Italian leather polished to a mirror shine. I adjusted my cuffs, feeling the weight of the solid gold links Anthony had given me. For the first time in 40 years, I did not feel like a mechanic pretending to be a guest. I felt like the owner of the company arriving to inspect a failing subsidiary. I walked toward the garden where the guests were gathering. The path was lined with white hydrangeas. As I rounded the corner, the chatter of the crowd hit me. There were 300 people here, the elite of the city, politicians, bankers, socialites. They were sipping champagne and gossiping about the merger between the Robinson land and the Harrington Empire. Then they saw me. The hush started at the back of the crowd and rolled forward like a wave. People turned. Glasses stopped halfway to mouths. The whispers died out. They were expecting the hunched-over man in the frayed charcoal suit. They were expecting the gardener. Instead, they saw a man who walked with the stride of a lion. I saw a banker I had done business with years ago squinting at me, trying to place where he knew me from. I saw women nudging their husbands, pointing at the cut of my jacket. I walked straight toward the front row. Victoria Harrington was there giving orders to the wedding planner. She turned around ready to scold me for being late or for looking disheveled. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked me up and down. Her eyes narrowed. She was looking for a flaw. She was looking for a loose thread or a scuffed heel. She found nothing. "Frank," she said. Her voice was unsure for the first time since I met her. "You look different." I looked her dead in the eye. I felt no intimidation. I only felt a mild amusement. "It is amazing what a good tailor can do, Victoria," I said. My voice was deep and resonant. "I told you I clean up well." She laughed, but it was a nervous sound. She adjusted her diamond necklace. "Well, I suppose you do. Did you rent that? It looks quite expensive for a retiree. I hope you did not spend your entire pension on one day." I smiled. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a trap. "Do not worry about my finances, Victoria," I said. "I have made some very smart investments recently. Very smart." She frowned, sensing something was off, but she pushed it away. Her arrogance was too strong to let her see the danger. "Just take your seat, Frank," she said, waving her hand. "Or go find Jasmine. She is in the bridal tent. And please try not to crease the suit before the photos." I walked past her. I felt her eyes boring into my back. She was confused. Good. Confusion breeds mistakes. And today I needed them to make mistakes. I entered the white silk tent where the bride was waiting. It smelled of hairspray and lilies. Jasmine was standing in front of a full-length mirror. She looked breathtaking. Her dress was a cloud of lace and tulle. Her hair was piled high on her head, adorned with crystals. To the outside world, she was the perfect princess bride, but I knew what rotted underneath that white silk. She saw me in the mirror. Her eyes widened. She spun around. "Dad," she said. Her voice was high and tight. "You are here." I walked closer. I stopped 3 feet away. I did not hug her. I did not cry. I just looked at her. "You look beautiful, Jasmine," I said. She smoothed her dress, looking at herself in the mirror again. "I know," she said. "This dress cost $12,000, Dad. Can you believe it? Victoria paid for it. Well, she put it on her account." She turned back to me and finally really looked at my suit. Her eyebrows shot up. "Wow," she said. "Where did you get that? It looks like something Blake would wear. Did you find it at a thrift store in the rich part of town?" I stood still. Even now at the end, she could not imagine I was capable of buying something nice. She assumed I was a scavenger. "Mrs. Patterson helped me out," I said. Jasmine rolled her eyes. "Of course. That old lady probably has a stash of dead people clothes in the back." "Well, at least it fits. Just do not tell anyone where you got it, okay? Tell them it is vintage. That sounds better than used." She stepped closer, fixing my bow tie with aggressive little tugs. "Listen, Dad," she whispered, and her voice dropped to a hiss. "We are about to go out there. There are cameras everywhere. The mayor is here. Do not mess this up. Do not trip on my train. And for God's sake, do not start crying and blubbering about Mom. This is a happy occasion. We need to look dignified. The Harringtons value dignity." I looked down at her hands, the hands that I had held when she was a baby, the hands that had thrown my wife brooch down a trash chute. "I will be the definition of dignity, Jasmine," I said. "I promise you this is a day that no one in this town will ever forget. I am going to make sure your name is on everyone's lips by sunset." She smiled, satisfied with my submission. "That is good, Dad. Just walk me down the aisle, hand me to Blake, and then go sit down. Do not try to make a speech or anything. Just fade into the background. Fade into the background. That had been my role for 20 years. But the background was full now. It was time to step into the spotlight. The music started. The wedding march. It swelled through the garden. "Let us go," Jasmine said, taking my arm. "Do not shake." I led her out of the tent. We stepped onto the white carpet runner. The sun was blinding. The faces of 300 people turned toward us. I saw the envy in their eyes. They saw a wealthy old man walking his daughter to a fairy tale marriage. They saw the illusion. We walked slowly, step by step. I felt Jasmine grip on my arm. She was squeezing hard, not out of affection, but out of control. She was steering me. I looked ahead. At the end of the aisle stood Blake. He looked like a statue of perfection in his black tuxedo. His hair was gelled. His teeth were white. He watched us approach with a look of triumph. He was not looking at his bride. He was looking at me. He was looking at the man he thought he had swindled. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. The nod of a con artist acknowledging his mark. I looked to his left. Courtney was standing there as the maid of honor. She was holding Jasmine bouquet. She was wearing a dress that was cut too low and too tight. She caught my eye and smirked. It was the same smirk I had heard in her voice in the fitting room. I walked my daughter up the stairs of the gazebo. I did not stumble. I did not cry. I moved with the precision of a machine. "Who gives this woman to be married to this man?" the priest asked. The traditional answer was, "Her mother and I." But Lucille was gone, and I was done sharing credit with ghosts. "I do," I said. My voice was loud, clear. It carried to the back row without a microphone. I took Jasmine's hand from my arm and placed it in Blake's hand. His palm was sweaty. I felt the moisture against my skin. He was nervous even if he hit it well. I stepped back. I did not go to my seat immediately. I stood there for a second longer than was comfortable blocking their view of each other. I looked at Blake. I looked at Jasmine. "Good luck," I said. They thought I was wishing them well. They did not hear the warning. I walked down the steps and took my seat in the front row. Victoria leaned over to me. "You managed not to fall over," she whispered. "Good job, Frank." I ignored her. I fixed my eyes on the altar. The priest began the ceremony. He spoke of love. He spoke of honesty. He spoke of two souls becoming one. Every word was a lie. Every sentence was an insult to the sanctity of marriage. Blake said his vows first. "Jasmine," he said, his voice trembling with fake emotion, "I promise to love you and cherish you, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health." For poorer. I almost laughed out loud. He had no idea how poor he was about to be. Then it was Jasmine's turn. "Blake," she said, tears shining in her eyes, "you are my rock. You are my future. I promise to be faithful to you as long as we both shall live. Faithful." I looked at Courtney. She was standing right behind Jasmine. As Jasmine said the word faithful, Courtney looked at Blake. She bit her lip, and then she winked. It was quick, a fraction of a second. But I saw it. Blake saw it. He suppressed a smile. They were mocking my daughter right in front of her face. They were mocking the vows. They were mocking God. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. It was heavy and solid like a lead weight. Any last doubt I had, any last hesitation about destroying Jasmine's happiness vanished in that moment. She was marrying a snake, and her best friend was the venom. If I stopped the wedding now, I would be the villain. I would be the crazy father ruining the moment. But if I let them finish, if I let them sign the marriage license, then their fate was sealed. Then the humiliation would be total. I sat back in my chair. I crossed my legs. I adjusted the expensive fabric of my trousers. I watched them exchange rings. The diamonds sparkled. The lies sparkled. "You may kiss the bride," the priest said. Blake leaned in. He kissed Jasmine. It was a performance, a show for the cameras. The guests applauded. Victoria dabbed at her dry eyes with a handkerchief. I did not clap. I sat perfectly still. My hands rested on my knees. My breathing was slow and even. The ceremony was over. The trap was armed. Now came the reception. Now came the speeches. Now came the end of the world as they knew it. I watched them walk back down the aisle, hand in hand, beaming at the crowd. They looked so happy. They looked so victorious. Enjoy the walk, I thought. It is the last time you will ever walk with your heads held high. I stood up and joined the procession. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the garden. The darkness was coming, and I was bringing it with me. The sun had finally dipped below the horizon, and the garden was illuminated by thousands of tiny fairy lights strung through the oak trees. It was a setting designed for romance, but to me, it looked like a stage set for a tragedy. The waiters were circulating with trays of filet mignon and lobster tails. The champagne flowed like water. I sat at my table in the front row watching the performance unfold. I had not touched my food. My hunger had been replaced by a cold, hard knot of anticipation. Blake stood up from the head table. He tapped a silver spoon against his crystal flute. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the chatter of the crowd. Silence fell over the garden. He adjusted his silk tie and took the microphone from the DJ. He looked like the prince of the city. He was handsome, confident, and utterly corrupt. He smiled at the crowd, and then he smiled at Jasmine, who gazed up at him with adoration that made my stomach turn. "Thank you all for coming," Blake said, his voice smooth and practiced. "Tonight is not just about the union of two hearts. It is about the union of two families, two legacies, and it is about the future." He paused for effect. He looked out over the assembled guests, making eye contact with the bankers and the investors he needed to impress. Many of you know that the Harrington family has faced some challenges in recent years. The market is tough, but we are tougher. And today, I am proud to announce that we are launching a new chapter. He gestured vaguely toward the horizon, toward the direction of my salvage yard. Thanks to the incredible generosity of my new family, we have acquired a prime piece of real estate. 50 acres of industrial land that has been sitting dormant and underutilized for decades. Dormant, underutilized. He was talking about a business that generated millions in revenue. He was talking about the sweat and blood I had poured into that soil. To him, it was just dirt waiting for his concrete. "We will be breaking ground on Monday for the Harrington Tech Park," Blake announced. "A state-of-the-art facility that will revitalize this entire district. And it is all thanks to the vision of my beautiful wife, Jasmine." The crowd applauded, they cheered, they raised their glasses to Jasmine. She stood up and waved, accepting the credit for a gift she had stolen. Blake did not mention my name. He did not point to me. In his narrative, I did not exist. I was just the obstacle that had been removed. I was the ghost in the machine. I watched him bask in the applause. I watched the greed in his eyes. He truly believed he had won. He believed that the signature I had scrawled on that paper was his golden ticket. He had no idea that the ink was barely dry, and the legal injunction was already moving through the court system. But that was a surprise for Monday. Tonight, I had a different surprise. I waited until the applause began to die down. Blake was raising his glass for a final toast. "To the future," he said. "To the truth," I said. My voice was not shouted, but it was projected from the diaphragm, deep and resonant. It carried across the silent garden. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the stone patio. Every head turned. Blake lowered his glass. He squinted at me through the glare of the spotlights. Victoria Harrington stood up halfway, her face twisting into a mask of irritation. "Sit down, Frank," she hissed. "You are drunk." I was stone-cold sober. I buttoned my jacket. I walked toward the stage. I did not rush. I walked with the slow, inevitable pace of a storm front. The guests parted for me. They saw something in my face that silenced their whispers. They saw the man who owned the midnight blue tuxedo, not the man who wore the patched suit. "Frank, what are you doing?" Blake asked into the microphone. His voice echoed slightly. "This is not the time for speeches." I kept walking. I reached the stairs to the stage. Victoria moved. She was fast for a woman in heels. She rushed from the head table, intending to intercept me before I could reach the microphone. She was going to grab my arm. She was going to call security. She was going to humiliate me one last time to protect her son. Moment of glory. "Security," she shrieked. "Escort this man out." Two large men in black suits stepped out from the shadows near the DJ booth. Victoria smiled triumphantly. She thought they were her hired muscle, but they did not move toward me. They moved toward her. One of the men, a giant with a scar over his eye, stepped directly in Victoria's path. He did not touch her, but he occupied the space so completely that she had to stop or run into him like a wall. "Excuse me, Ma. The guard said, his voice low and firm. "Please return to your seat." Victoria gaped at him. "Do you know who I am? I am paying you." "Actually," I said, climbing the last step onto the stage. "I am paying them. And I pay double for loyalty." I reached Blake. He looked at the guards, then back at me. Fear flickered in his eyes for the first time. He realized that the variables had changed. He realized he was no longer the director of this play. "Give me the microphone, Blake," I said. He hesitated. He looked at the crowd. He looked at Jasmine. She was staring at me, her mouth slightly open, her face pale. "Dad, please," she whispered. "Don not do this." I took the microphone from Blake's hand. He let it go without a fight. He was too confused to resist. I turned to the crowd. 300 faces stared back at me. I saw curiosity. I saw judgment. I saw the hunger for drama. "My son-in-law speaks of the future," I said into the mic. My voice boomed over the speakers, clear and commanding. "He speaks of legacies. He speaks of honesty. But you cannot build a future on a foundation of lies. And you cannot build a legacy on theft." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I have a gift for the happy couple," I continued. "A wedding gift that is far more valuable than land or money. I give you the gift of clarity." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote control. I had bribed the audio-visual technician an hour before the ceremony. It cost me $500, but it was worth every penny. Behind the head table there was a massive projection screen that had been used earlier to show a slideshow of Jasmine and Blake posed photos. It was currently dark. I pointed the remote at the booth. "Roll it," I said. The screen flickered to life. It was not a professional video. It was grainy black and white footage from a security camera. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago. The image showed the interior of Mrs. Patterson's small tailoring shop. It showed the front counter. It showed the curtain of the fitting room, and it showed Blake and Courtney walking in. The crowd gasped. I heard a few nervous giggles. They thought it was a prank. They thought it was a blooper reel. But then the audio kicked in. The sound was crystal clear. Mrs. Patterson had installed high-quality microphones to protect herself from unruly customers. Every footstep echoed. Every breath was audible. "God, this place is a dump," Blake's voice boomed through the garden speakers. "Why did we have to come here, Courtney?" "Because, Blake," Courtney's voice purred, and the image on the screen showed her leaning into him, her hand sliding up his chest. "Old Mrs. Patterson is deaf as a post." On the stage, real life, Courtney dropped her champagne glass. It shattered on the floor, but no one looked at her. Every eye was glued to the screen. Jasmine stood up. Her hands were covering her mouth. She was shaking her head. The video continued. The sounds of kissing filled the garden. Wet, sloppy sounds that made the skin crawl. It was grotesque. It was intimate. And it was public. Then the conversation began. "So are we all set for Saturday?" Blake's voice asked from the speakers. "I am ready if you are," Courtney's voice replied. "But are you sure you can go through with it?" Kissing her at the altar. "It is going to make me sick watching you play the loving husband." I looked at Jasmine. She was not looking at the screen anymore. She was looking at Blake. Her eyes were wide, filled with a horror so absolute it looked like madness. Blake was frozen. He was staring at the screen, his face drained of all color. He looked like a corpse standing upright. "It is just a performance, babe." Blake's voice laughed on the video. "Think of the prize. Think of the land." The crowd went deadly silent. The wind rustled the leaves. The only sound was the damning voice of the groom echoing through the night. "The old man is clueless," the recording continued. "He thinks I am doing him a favor by taking his daughter off his hands. He has no idea that pile of dirt he lives on is the only thing saving my family from bankruptcy." I saw the bankers in the audience exchange looks. I saw the investors pull out their phones. The secret was out. The Harrington financial ruin was now broadcast to the entire city. "My mother ran the numbers," the voice said. "Once we get married, I will get him to sign the deed over as a wedding gift. He is desperate for Jasmine to be taken care of." On the screen, Blake and Courtney were now embracing again. "And what about Jasmine?" Courtney asked. Blake scoffed. "Jasmine, please. She is a prop. She is so desperate to be a Harrington she will believe anything. Once the land is sold, I will file for divorce. I give it 6 months. I will tell her it is not working out. I will throw her a few $1,000s to keep her quiet, and she will be back in that trailer park or wherever her dad crawled out of." The video ended. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavy. It was a physical weight pressing down on the garden. It was the silence of a bomb that had just detonated, but the shockwave had not yet hit. I lowered the microphone. I looked at Blake. He was trembling. His hands were shaking so hard he had to grip the edge of the table to stay standing. I looked at Jasmine. She was making a sound, a low, keening wail that was building in her throat. She looked at her best friend. She looked at her husband. And then she looked at me. I did not offer her comfort. I did not step forward to hold her. I stood my ground. You wanted a show. I said, my voice quiet now but audible to everyone on the stage. You wanted the world to know the Harrington name. Well, now they know. Blake lunged. He snapped. The pressure was too much. He launched himself at me, his face twisted into a snarl of pure animal rage. You old bastard, he screamed. You ruined everything. He never reached me. My security guard, the one with the scar, moved with terrifying speed. He intercepted Blake mid-air. He grabbed him by the collar of his expensive tuxedo and slammed him onto the stage floor. Stay down, the guard roared. Jasmine screamed. Victoria was shouting incoherent orders. The guests were standing up, knocking over chairs. It was chaos. It was beautiful. I walked over to where Blake was pinned to the floor. I looked down at him. I did not ruin anything, Blake, I said. I just turned on the lights. And it turns out you are just as ugly in the light as you are in the dark. I dropped the microphone. It hit the stage with a thud that echoed like a gavel striking a block. I turned my back on them. I walked down the stairs. I adjusted my cuffs. I signaled to Anthony, who was standing by the entrance with the police officers. It is time, I said. The sirens began to wail in the distance, growing louder with every second. The party was over. The reckoning had arrived, and I was the only one walking away with my soul intact. The silence that followed the end of the video was heavier than the humid night air. It was a physical weight that pressed down on the 300 guests sitting in the garden. For a few seconds, nobody moved. It was as if the entire wedding party had been turned to stone by the ugly truth that had just blared through the speakers. I stood on the stage looking down at them. I saw the mayor's jaw hanging open. I saw the bankers exchanging terrified looks, realizing their investments were tied to a fraud. I saw the waiters standing frozen with trays of melting ice cream. The perfection of the Harrington estate had shattered. The white peacocks screeched in the distance, a shrill sound that broke the spell. Then the noise began. It started as a low hum of whispers and quickly escalated into a roar of shock and outrage. People were standing up, knocking over chairs in their haste to get a better look at the carnage. Smartphones were out recording every second of the humiliation. The Harringtons, who had spent a lifetime curating their image, were now trending for all the wrong reasons. I looked at Jasmine. She was the center of the storm. She stood near the cake table, her hands trembling violently. Her face, which had been glowing with pride just minutes ago, was now a mask of absolute horror. She looked at the blank screen where the video had played, and then she looked at Blake. It was the look of a person who realizes the ground they are standing on is actually a trap door. She had sold her father for a ticket to the high life, and that ticket had just been revealed as a forgery. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking gray and ghostly under the fairy lights. She opened her mouth to speak, but only a choked sob came out. Blake was in a state of frantic panic. He looked like a rat trapped in a corner. His eyes darted from the guests to his mother to me. He was sweating profusely, the moisture soaking through his expensive shirt. He tried to laugh, a high-pitched, hysterical sound that made everyone cringe. He waved his hands around as if he could physically shoo away the words that had been spoken. He grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and downed it in one gulp, his hands shaking so hard he spilled half of it down his chin. He was unraveling. The confident, smooth-talking predator was gone, replaced by a terrified child who had been caught red-handed. Victoria Harrington was the first to find her voice. She stood up, her face purple with rage. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "This is slander," she shrieked. "This is illegal. I will sue you for everything you have. Get him out of here. Somebody do something." But nobody moved to help her. Her power had evaporated the moment the truth came out. The guests looked at her with disgust. They realized that the grand dame of society was just as rotten as her son. Then the explosion happened. Jasmine's eyes locked onto Courtney. The maid of honor was trying to sneak away toward the garden exit, clutching her purse like a shield. She looked terrified. She knew that the game was up. Jasmine let out a scream that did not sound human. It was a primal noise, a mixture of grief and pure, unadulterated rage. You did this, Jasmine screamed, pointing at her best friend. You knew. You were laughing at me. Courtney froze. She tried to stammer an excuse. Jasmine, wait. I can explain. It was not like that. He forced me. Liar, Jasmine howled. Jasmine lunged. She moved with a speed I had never seen in her. She tackled Courtney, knocking her into a table of champagne flutes. Glass shattered everywhere, sending shards flying like diamonds. The two women rolled onto the grass, a tangle of white lace and pink silk. It was ugly. It was raw. Jasmine was clawing at Courtney, face ripping at her hair. The beautiful bride was gone. In her place was a woman scorned, destroying the only person she had trusted outside of her husband. Get off me, you crazy witch, Courtney yelled, kicking out with her heels. Guests gasped and backed away, forming a circle around the fight. No one intervened. It was too volatile, too personal. They watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. This was the high society wedding of the year, and it had turned into a street brawl. Blake saw the fight and saw his opportunity. He grabbed the microphone I had dropped. He jumped back onto the stage, his hair wild, his eyes manic. Listen to me, everyone, he shouted, his voice cracking over the speakers. Please calm down. This is all a setup. Cannot you see that? He pointed an accusing finger at me. That video is fake, he yelled. It is AI. It is a deepfake. That old man hired someone to manipulate our voices. I never said those things. Courtney never said those things. He is jealous. He is senile. He is trying to ruin my reputation because I am successful and he is a failure. He looked around the crowd, desperate for validation. You know me, Blake pleaded. You know the Harrington family. Would I ever speak like that? Would I ever betray my wife? This is technology run amok. It is a digital fabrication. He probably spent his life savings paying some hacker to create that. Do not believe your eyes. Believe me. He was good, I had to give him that. In this day and age, the deepfake excuse was a powerful shield. I saw doubt creeping into the faces of some of the older guests. They looked at me, then at Blake, wondering if it was possible. Victoria seized on the lie. Yes, she screamed. It is a fake. My son is a gentleman. Arrest that man for defamation. Blake gained confidence. He walked toward me, puffing out his chest. You are sick, Frank, he spat. You are a sick, twisted old man. I am going to have you thrown in jail for this. You think you can use computer tricks to steal my land. Well, it will not work. The deal is signed. The deed is mine. And you are going to rot in prison for this stunt. Jasmine and Courtney had been pulled apart by two security guards. Jasmine stood there panting, her dress torn, her hair a bird nest, staring at her husband. Is it true? Jasmine asked, her voice trembling. Is it a deep fake, Blake? Tell me it is fake. Blake looked at her, putting on his most sincere face. Baby, of course it is fake. I love you. I would never hurt you. Your father is trying to destroy us. He is mentally unstable. I stood there in the center of the chaos, perfectly still. The wind ruffled the hem of my midnight blue tuxedo. I did not shout. I did not wave my arms. I waited until Blake had finished his desperate speech. I waited until the crowd was silent, waiting for my defense. I reached out and took the microphone from Blake's hand. He tried to pull it away, but I gripped his wrist. My hand was calloused and strong from 40 years of turning wrenches. I squeezed. He winced and let go. I brought the microphone to my lips. I looked out at the sea of faces. I looked at the wreckage of the wedding. There are two things you cannot fake, I said, my voice calm and steady, cutting through the hysteria like a laser. You cannot fake the truth, and you cannot fake a timestamp. I turned to Blake. You say it is I said. You say it is a computer trick. But tell me, Blake, how did the computer know about the mole on your left shoulder? How did the computer know about the specific account number of the Harrington debt that you mentioned to Courtney in the parking lot before you walked into the shop? I have that audio too. Blake's face went white. And more importantly, I continued, turning back to the crowd. A deepfake cannot manufacture physical evidence. You said in that video that you were only marrying my daughter for the land. You said you would dump her in 6 months. You called her a prop. I reached into my inner pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was not the deed. It was a printout of an email chain. I hacked nothing, I said. But my lawyers are very good at discovery. This is an email sent from your personal account to your mother, Victoria, dated 3 weeks ago. Subject line, the exit strategy. In it, you detail exactly how you plan to divorce Jasmine once the funds from the land sale clear. You even budget for her hush money. $5,000. That is what you think my daughter is worth. $5,000. I held the paper up. Is this a deepfake too, Blake? I asked. Or is it just deep rot? Blake stumbled back. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. He could not deny the email. It was too specific. The lie had collapsed. I looked at Jasmine. She was weeping now, silent, broken tears. She finally saw the monster standing in front of her. I looked at the guests. I am not a rich man in your world, I said. I do not have a yacht. I do not have a summer home in the Hamptons. But I have honor, and I know the sound of a man who has none. I took a step toward Blake. He flinched. You called me a gardener earlier, I said. You were right. I am a gardener, and today I am pulling up the weeds. I signaled to Anthony, who was standing by the entrance. He nodded and opened the gate. A police cruiser rolled up the gravel driveway, its blue and red lights flashing silently. It was followed by a black sedan with government plates. The deepfake excuse is convenient, I said to Blake. But let us see if it works on the FBI. They are very interested in your creative accounting regarding that bank loan you mentioned in the video. The crowd parted as the officers marched onto the lawn. The air was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and imminent justice. I stood alone on the stage, a lighthouse in the middle of a hurricane, watching the waves come crashing down on the house of Harrington. The sound of sirens cutting through the summer air is usually a noise that brings panic, but to me, it sounded like a symphony. It started as a low wail in the distance, growing louder and sharper until it drowned out the murmurs of the guests and the rustling of the wind in the trees. The perfectly manicured garden of the Harrington estate was suddenly bathed in a chaotic wash of red and blue light. The flashing strobes bounced off the white silk of the wedding tent and reflected in the terrified eyes of the people who had come here to celebrate a merger of wealth. This was no longer a social event. It was a crime scene. I stood on the stage and watched the transformation. The guests who had been so eager to drink Harrington champagne were now backing away, desperately trying to distance themselves from the head table. They knocked over chairs and spilled drinks in their haste to fade into the shadows. The bankers, who had been shaking Blake's hand an hour ago, were now checking their phones, pretending to be invisible. The illusion of high society had evaporated, leaving only the ugly reality of fraud exposed for the world to see. From the driveway came the sound of heavy car doors slamming shut. It was a solid, authoritative sound. These were not local patrol officers coming to break up a noise complaint. A team of agents in dark windbreakers moved onto the lawn. On the back of their jackets in bold yellow letters were the initials that make even the most arrogant white-collar criminals tremble. FBI. Beside them marched officers from the State Economic Crimes Unit. They moved with a precision that told everyone this was not a spontaneous visit. This was the culmination of a long and detailed investigation. Blake Harrington stood frozen on the stage next to me. He looked at the approaching agents and then he looked at me. His face was a mask of disbelief. He could not process that his world of privilege had been breached. He had spent his whole life believing that fences and security guards and money could keep reality out. But reality had just kicked down the front gate. "What did you do?" Blake whispered, his voice trembling. "You called the police on your own family." I looked at him. "I did not call the police on my family," I said calmly. "I called the police on a criminal enterprise. My family is safe." The lead agent walked straight to the stage. He was a tall man with a face carved from granite. He did not look at the decorations. He did not look at the crying bride. He looked straight at Victoria Harrington. "Victoria Harrington," the agent said, his voice carrying over the silence. Victoria drew herself up to her full height. She smoothed her silver dress and lifted her chin, attempting to summon the imperious attitude that had served her well for decades. "I am Mrs. Harrington," she announced, "and I demand to know the meaning of this intrusion. This is a private event. You are trespassing. I will have your badge for this. I know the police commissioner personally. I will be making a call." The agent did not blink. He did not care about her empty threats. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. "You can make your call from the station, Mrs. Harrington," he said. "We have a warrant for your arrest." "Arrest!" Victoria screeched. Her voice cracked, losing all its posh refinement. "For what?" "Being successful. This is harassment. For conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and embezzlement of investor funds," the agent read from the paper. We also have a separate warrant for the misuse of charitable assets. The words hung in the air like smoke. Embezzlement, money laundering. These were dirty words. They were the words of common thieves dressed up in designer clothes. 2 officers stepped forward. They did not ask her to come quietly. They took her arms. Victoria pulled back, struggling against their grip. "Get your hands off me," she screamed. "Do not you touch me." "Blake, do something. Tell them who we are." Blake did not move. He could not move. He was watching his mother being handcuffed. The click of the metal cuffs was a sharp mechanical sound that seemed louder than the sirens. Victoria Harrington, the woman who had sneered at my suit, the woman who had called me a gardener, was now being marched across her own lawn with her hands behind her back. Her silver dress was wrinkled. Her dignity was gone. The guests held up their phones, filming every second of her downfall. She was finally the star of the show, but the script had changed. The lead agent turned his attention to the stage. He looked at Blake. "Blake Harrington," he said. Blake flinched as if he had been slapped. "We have a warrant for you as well," the agent said, walking up the stairs. "Credit fraud, submitting false financial statements to a federally insured bank, and conspiracy." "No," Blake shouted, backing away until he bumped into the table. "No, you have got it all wrong. This is a mistake, a clerical error. We are solvent. We are rich. Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the agent ordered, reaching for his cuffs. Blake's eyes darted around the garden, looking for an escape, looking for a lifeline. He looked at Jasmine, who was sitting on the floor, sobbing into her ruined dress. He looked at the guests, who were staring at him with judgment. He looked at me. He saw no sympathy in my eyes. He saw only the reflection of his own failure. Then his eyes lit up with a desperate, manic idea. He reached into the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket. The agents reached for their holsters, thinking he was going for a weapon. "Wait!" Blake screamed. "Wait! I can prove it! I can pay!" He pulled out the folded document, the same document I had signed in the private dining room, the deed to my land. He held it up like a shield. He waved it in the air, his hand shaking so hard the paper made a rattling sound. "Look at this!" Blake yelled at the agent. "Look, this is a deed, a transfer of property. I own 50 acres of prime industrial land. It is worth $20 million. $20 million. He laughed a jagged, hysterical sound. "I can pay back the loans," he insisted. "I have the assets right here. You cannot arrest me for being broke, because I am not broke. I am rich. My father-in-law just signed this over to me. Ask him." He pointed at me, his finger trembling. "Ask him," Blake pleaded. "Tell them, Frank. Tell them you gave me the land. Tell them I am good for the money." The agent paused. He looked at the paper in Blake's hand. Then he looked at me. "Is this true, sir?" the agent asked. "Did you sign this document transferring your property to Mr. Harrington?" I took a step forward. I stood next to the agent. I looked at Blake. He was sweating, his eyes wide and pleading. He was begging me to save him. He was begging the man he had planned to discard to throw him a life preserver. I looked at the paper. I saw the signature. Frank Robinson, with the loop on the N, the distress marker. "I did sign a piece of paper," I said slowly. My voice was calm. Blake let out a sob of relief. "See," he shouted. "I told you. It is mine." But I continued, cutting him off. "That document is worthless." Blake's smile vanished. "What?" I turned to the agent. "The property he is referring to belongs to Robinson Logistics Incorporated. I am the CEO, but I cannot transfer corporate assets for personal use without a board resolution and full legal review. That piece of paper he is holding has no legal standing. It is just a souvenir." Blake stared at the paper in his hand. He looked at the ink. He looked at the signature. "But you signed it," he whispered. "You signed it." "I signed it under duress," I said, "and I signed it knowing it was invalid." "You tried to steal from me, Blake. You tried to use my life work to cover up your crimes. But you forgot to check who actually owned the land." I leaned in closer so only he could hear me. "You are not a businessman, Blake. You are just a thief in a rented suit. And now the rent is due." Blake dropped the paper. It fluttered to the ground, landing in a puddle of spilled champagne. The ink began to run, immediately blurring the signature until it was just a dark stain. The shield was gone. The money was a mirage. The reality of the handcuffs was the only thing left. The agent spun Blake around. He slammed him against the table. Blake did not fight. The fight had left him the moment that paper hit the ground. He went limp. The handcuffs clicked into place. "You have the right to remain silent," the agent recited. I watched them drag him down the stairs. He walked past Jasmine, but he did not look at her. He was mumbling to himself, repeating the same words over and over again. 20 million. 20 million. I looked at the garden. It was a ruin, but it was a clean ruin. The rot had been cut out. The infection had been removed. I looked down at the paper dissolving in the puddle. I reached out with the toe of my polished Italian shoe and stepped on it, grinding it into the stone. The sirens continued to wail, but now they sounded different. They sounded like a cleanup crew. The Harringtons were gone. Their legacy was in the back of a police car. I adjusted my cufflinks. I took a deep breath of the night air. It smelled of rain and ozone. It smelled of a storm that had finally passed. I turned to look for my daughter. The hardest part was over. Now the rebuilding had to begin. The garden was quiet now except for the rhythmic flashing of the police lights and the heavy breathing of the man currently pressed against the catering table. Blake Harrington had lost his composure entirely. He was twisting his neck, trying to look at me, trying to look at the agent, trying to find a crack in the wall that had suddenly sprung up around him. He was still clinging to the idea of the land. It was his only lifeline. In his mind, as long as he had that piece of paper, he had $20 million, and with $20 million, you can make problems like the FBI go away. He did not understand that he was holding a ticket to a ship that had already sunk. I nodded to Anthony. My lawyer stepped out from the shadows where he had been standing with the federal agents. He walked into the circle of light created by the police strobes. He looked out of place at a wedding in his severe charcoal suit and rimless glasses, but he looked exactly right for an execution. He carried a sleek black briefcase. He placed it on a dry spot on the table right next to where Blake's face was pressed against the linen. The click of the latches opening was sharp and loud. Anathi pulled out a document. It was a high-resolution copy of the deed Blake had made me sign. Anthony held it up so the light hit it clearly. "Let us look at the evidence," Anthony said. His voice was dry and precise, the voice of a man who charges $500 an hour to dismantle people's lives. He pointed to the bottom of the page. "Mr. Harrington claims this is a valid transfer of title," Anthony addressed the federal agent, but he was speaking loud enough for the trembling guests to hear. "He claims Frank Robinson signed over his property. But if we examine the signature, we see the first problem." Anthony traced the name with his finger. "The signature reads, Frank Robinson," Anthony noted. "However, my client's legal name, as stated on his birth certificate and all government identification, is Franklin Thelonious Robinson. In the state of Georgia, for a real estate transaction of this magnitude, the grantor must sign their full legal name exactly as it appears on the title deed. A signature of a nickname or an abbreviation renders the document contestable immediately. It suggests informality. It suggests a lack of intent." Blake lifted his head from the table. His cheek was smeared with cake frosting. "It is close enough," he spat. "He goes by Frank. Everyone calls him Frank. No judge will throw it out just because of a middle name." Anthony smiled. It was a shark smile, thin and terrifying. Perhaps not, Anthony conceded. "If that were the only issue, we might be in civil court for months. But it is not the only issue." He tapped the end of the signature. "Please observe the final letter N in the name Robinson," Anthony said. "Do you see the loop at the end? The small downward stroke that crosses back over the letter." I watched Blake squint. He had seen it in the restaurant. He had thought it was a mistake. "A slip of an old man hand. That is not a mistake," Anthony said, his voice dropping an octave. "That is a distress marker." A murmur went through the crowd. Most of them had never heard the term. In the world of high-stakes logistics and industrial negotiation, Anthony explained, Frank Robinson developed a code. When he is forced to sign a contract under duress, when he is being intimidated or threatened or defrauded, he modifies his signature. He adds that loop. It is a signal to his bank, his attorneys, and his board of directors. It means, "Do not honor this." It means, "I am being held hostage." We have notarized affidavits dating back 20 years establishing this protocol. I stepped forward. I looked down at Blake. "You told me to sign it," I said. "You and your mother stood over me and forced a pen into my hand. You threatened to cut me off from my daughter. You used emotional blackmail. That is duress, Blake. And I signed it exactly the way a hostage signs a ransom note." Blake's face went gray. The fight was draining out of him. He realized that the piece of paper was not a golden ticket. It was a confession. But wait, Anthony interrupted himself. He raised a finger. We are arguing about the signature on the deed, but we have not discussed the most important part, the deed itself. This was the moment, the payoff. I crossed my arms and watched. Anthony reached back into his briefcase. He pulled out a thick-bound document with a blue cover. It looked heavy. It looked like the kind of document that governed nations. You see, Anthony said, flipping the pages, even if Mr. Robinson had signed his full name, even if he had signed it in blood with a smile on his face. He could not give you that land, Mr. Harrington. Blake blinked. Why, he whispered. It is his land. He lives on it. Anthony shook his head. No, Anthony said. Frank Robinson does not own the land. The silence in the garden was absolute. Even the police radios seemed to quiet down. The land located at 405 Industrial Way, Anthony declared, reading from the blue document, is the sole property of Robinson Logistics Incorporated, a C corporation registered in the state of Delaware. He turned the document around to show the incorporation papers. Frank Robinson is the founder and the majority shareholder, Anthony explained. But he is also an employee. The land is a corporate asset. It belongs to the entity, not the individual. To transfer a corporate asset of that value requires a majority vote from the board of directors. It requires a corporate resolution. It requires a 30-day review period by the compliance officers. Anthony closed the folder with a heavy thud. Frank Robinson cannot wake up one morning and decide to give away a $20 million factory as a wedding gift any more than the president can decide to give away the White House. It is not his to give. I watched the realization hit Blake. It hit him like a physical blow. His eyes rolled back slightly and his knees buckled. He was held up only by the agent grip on his handcuffs. He had spent months planning this. He had seduced my daughter. He had courted my favor. He had leveraged his entire company future on this asset. And he had never once bothered to do a basic title search. He had been so blinded by his arrogance, so sure that I was just a simple mechanic living on a junk pile that he never checked who actually owned the junk. He tried to steal a car, I said, my voice cutting through the night air. But he forgot to check if the car had an engine. And he definitely forgot to check who held the keys. Blake looked at me. His expression was no longer arrogant. It was no longer angry. It was just empty. He looked like a man who had woken up to find the world had ended. You knew, he whispered. You knew the whole time. When I gave you the paper, when I handed you the pen, you knew it was worthless. I leaned in close. I knew I said, I let you dig your own grave, Blake. I just handed you the shovel. You were so busy looking down on me that you did not notice you were standing in a hole. The federal agent had heard enough. He pulled Blake up from the table. That is enough, the agent said. Blake Harrington, you are under arrest for bank fraud and conspiracy. The paper you tried to pass as collateral is a forgery and a fraudulent instrument. He spun Blake around and began to march him toward the patrol cars. Blake did not fight. He did not scream. He stumbled, his expensive Italian shoes dragging in the grass. He passed the guests who turned their backs on him. He passed the white peacocks who watched with indifferent eyes. As he was shoved into the back of the police cruiser, he looked out the window one last time. He looked at the mansion he was about to lose. He looked at the wife he had betrayed, and then he looked at me. I stood on the steps of the gazebo, the master of the board. I did not smile. I did not wave. I just watched. The door slammed shut. The sound was final. It was the sound of a checkmate. I looked at Anthony. He was putting the documents back into his briefcase. He looked bored. For him, this was just another Tuesday. For me, it was the end of a long, dark winter. I turned to face the garden. Jasmine was still sitting on the grass. She was not looking at the police car. She was looking at the ground. She was looking at the shattered pieces of her life. The guests were leaving. They were scurrying away like rats fleeing a sinking ship. They wanted no part of this scandal. They wanted to go home and scrub the Harrington name off their social calendars. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain and justice. The signature was worthless. The deed was void. My land was safe. My company was safe. But as I looked at my daughter alone in the wreckage of her white dress, I knew that not everything had been saved. Some things had to be broken so they could be built again. And looking at the ruins of the wedding, I knew the hard work was just beginning. The last police cruiser disappeared down the long gravel driveway, leaving behind a trail of red dust that settled slowly over the ruins of the wedding. The sirens faded into the distance until the only sounds remaining were the chirping of crickets and the frantic clatter of the catering staff clearing away the debris. It was over. The great Harrington spectacle had ended not with fireworks, but with handcuffs. I stood near the edge of the garden and watched the exodus. It was a pathetic sight. The 300 guests who had fought for invitations, who had preened for the cameras and toasted to eternal love, had vanished in less than 10 minutes. They did not say goodbye to the bride. They did not offer to help. They ran. They scrambled into their luxury cars and sped away, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. I saw the mayor drop his gift on a chair and practically jog to his limousine. I saw the bankers deleting photos from their phones as they walked. They were like rats fleeing a ship that they had helped to sink. They left behind overturned chairs, shattered champagne flutes, and half-eaten plates of lobster that were now attracting ants. The white silk tent, which had looked so magical an hour ago, now looked like a deflated balloon. The wind had picked up, blowing napkins and programs across the lawn. I walked through the empty tables. I saw a program lying in a puddle of wine. It had a picture of Blake and Jasmine on the cover. Their smiles looked grotesque now. Two predators who thought they had captured the world only to find themselves caught in a snare of their own making. Jasmine was the only one left. She was sitting on the edge of the stage where her husband had been arrested. Her $12,000 dress was ruined. The hem was stained with grass and mud. The lace was torn where she had fought with Courtney. She looked small. She looked defeated. She was staring at the empty driveway, waiting for someone to come back. Waiting for Blake to return and tell her it was all a bad dream. Waiting for Victoria to scream at someone and fix it. But nobody was coming. The Harringtons were gone, and they had taken their illusions with them. I did not feel joy seeing her like this. I felt a deep, hollow ache. No father wants to see his child broken, but I also knew that a bone has to be set before it can heal, and Jasmine had been walking on a crooked leg for a long time. "Excuse me, Mrs. Harrington." The voice was sharp and businesslike. It broke the silence like a dropped plate. I turned to see the catering manager. He was a short man in a tuxedo that was slightly too tight. He was holding a clipboard in one hand and a portable credit card terminal in the other. He did not look sympathetic. He looked worried. He looked like a man who realized his profit margin was about to walk out the door in handcuffs. Jasmine looked up. She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. "What?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse. "The bill, ma'am," the manager said. He thrust the clipboard toward her. "We require settlement of the final balance immediately. Per our contract, full payment is due upon completion of service." Jasmine stared at him. "Are you kidding me? My husband just got arrested. My mother-in-law is in jail. Cannot this wait until tomorrow?" "I am afraid," not the manager said. His tone hardened. "Given the circumstances involving the federal investigation and the asset freeze mentioned by the agents, we need to secure payment now. The total outstanding balance is $52,400. That includes the premium bar package, the lobster upgrade, and the overtime for the staff." "50,000, Jasmine whispered. She looked like she was going to be sick. I watched from the shadows. I knew the Harringtons never paid for anything up front. They lived on credit. They lived on the promise of future money. Jasmine fumbled with her small beaded clutch. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it twice. She pulled out a sleek black credit card. It was Blake's card, the one he used to flash around town to impress people. "Here," she said, handing it to the manager. "Just run it. Just let me leave." The manager took the card. He inserted it into the machine. The silence stretched out. Jasmine held her breath. I held mine. Beep. The sound was loud and final. The manager looked at the screen. He shook his head. "Declined," he said. "Try it again," Jasmine pleaded. "It must be a mistake. That is a black card. It has no limit." "It has a limit when the account is frozen by the FBI, the manager said coldly. "It says refer to issuer. That means the assets are seized. Do you have another form of payment?" Jasmine dug through her purse. She pulled out another card, Victoria card. "Try this one," she said, desperate now. The manager sighed, but he swiped it. Beep. Declined. Jasmine began to panic. She was hyperventilating. She looked around the empty garden. She looked at the waiters who were now pausing in their cleanup to watch the drama. They knew they might not get their tips. They looked angry. "I do not have $50,000, Jasmine cried. "I do not have anything." Blake handled the money. "Please, you have to give me time." The manager stepped closer. He invaded her personal space. He was no longer the servant. He was the debt collector. "We have provided the goods and services, Mrs. Harrington. The lobster is eaten. The champagne is drunk. If you cannot pay, we will have to call the police back here. Theft of services is a serious crime. You could join your husband in the cell tonight." "No," Jasmine shrieked. "No, please do not call the police. I cannot go to jail. I did nothing wrong." "Then pay the bill." The manager snapped. Jasmine looked around wildly. Her eyes landed on me. She had ignored me for the last 10 minutes. She had sat there in her misery pretending I did not exist, hoping that maybe I would just disappear. But now she needed me. The realization hit her face like a physical blow. She saw the man in the blue tuxedo. She saw the man she had planned to discard, and she saw an ATM. She scrambled to her feet. She ran toward me. She tripped on her torn dress, but she kept coming. She threw herself at my feet. It was a theatrical gesture. It was the move of a bad actress in a soap opera. "Dad," she wailed. "Daddy, help me." I stood still. I did not reach down to help her up. I looked down at the top of her head. I saw the crystal tiara that was slightly crooked. She grabbed my hand. Her palms were cold and clammy. "Daddy, please," she sobbed. "You have to help me. That man is going to call the police. You have money, right? You said you have money. You bought the debt. You are the CEO. Pay him. Please, just pay him." I pulled my hand away gently but firmly. I stepped back, creating a distance between us. "Get up, Jasmine," I said. She looked up at me. Her face was a mess of tears and makeup, but in her eyes I did not see remorse. I saw calculation. I saw her mind working, trying to find the angle that would open my wallet. "Dad, I am a victim here," she said, speaking fast, her words tumbling over each other. "You saw what happened. Blake lied to me. He tricked me. I did not know anything about the fraud. I did not know they were broke. I am innocent. I am just a girl who fell in love with the wrong man." She reached for me again, clutching the leg of my trousers. "I am your daughter," she pleaded. "Your little girl. You cannot let them take me to jail. You cannot leave me here with this bill. It is not fair. I have suffered enough tonight. Look at me. My wedding is ruined. My life is ruined. You have to fix it. That is what fathers do. They fix things." I looked at her. I remembered the little girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me to fix her broken dolls. I had fixed them every time. I had glued them and stitched them and bought her new ones. I had spent my life fixing her mistakes, shielding her from the consequences of her own vanity. And look where that had got us. I looked at the catering manager who was waiting impatiently, tapping his foot. I stepped sideways so I was no longer blocking Jasmine's view of the manager. "Jasmine," I said, my voice low and even, "do you remember what you said in the apartment?" She froze. She stopped crying instantly. She knew. "You said I was a tax write-off," I reminded her. "You said you would speed up the process of getting rid of me. You said you would put me in a warehouse for state cases because you did not want me smelling up your new house." "Dad, I did not mean it," she stammered. "I was drunk. Courtney made me say it." "Stop," I said. The word was not loud, but it had the weight of a hammer. "You meant every word, Jasmine. You were not a victim of Blake fraud. You were a willing accomplice. You knew he wanted the land. You knew he wanted to sell my home. You just did not know he was going to dump you afterward. You are not crying because you lost your integrity. You are crying because you lost your payout." I looked at the catering manager. "Sir," I said. The manager looked at me hopeful. "Are you taking care of this, sir?" I reached into my inner pocket. Jasmine's eyes lit up. She thought I was reaching for a checkbook. She thought she had won. She thought the old Frank was back, the Frank who could not say no to his princess. I pulled out a small business card. It was my card. Frank Robinson, CEO, Robinson Logistics. I handed it to the manager. "Send the bill for my meal to this address," I said. "I had the chicken. And 1 glass of water." The manager looked at the card, then at me, confused. "And the rest of the bill, sir? The 50,000. I looked at Jasmine. She was staring at me with her mouth open. She could not believe what was happening. "That is Mrs. Harrington's bill," I said. "She ordered the lobster. She ordered the champagne. She wanted the party. She can pay for it." "Dad," Jasmine screamed, "you cannot be serious. I do not have $50,000. "Then you better start washing dishes," I said, "or sell the dress, or ask your mother-in-law for a loan, but do not ask me." I turned my back on her. "Dad, wait!" she screamed. "You cannot leave me here. I am your family." I stopped. I turned my head slightly. Family does not throw family in the trash. Jasmine, I said. I walked away. I walked down the long gravel driveway, past the police cars, past the white peacocks, past the ruins of the fake empire. I heard her screaming my name behind me. I heard the manager talking about calling the precinct. I kept walking. My heart was breaking with every step, but my head was high. I was not leaving her to be cruel. I was leaving her to learn. She had spent her life climbing on my back to reach the stars. Now she was going to have to learn how to stand on her own 2 feet, even if she had to stand in the mud. The night air was cool. I loosened my tie. I walked toward my rental car. I was alone, but I was free, and for the first time in a long time I felt clean. I stopped walking, but I did not turn around. I could hear Jasmine panting behind me. Her breath was ragged and she was sobbing. It was the sound of a child who had fallen off a bike, but this time there was no scrape to kiss better. There was only the gaping wound of her own betrayal. "Daddy, please," she choked out. "Do not walk away from me. You are all I have left. Blake is gone. Victoria is gone. They are going to take the house. They are going to take everything. If you leave me now, I will be on the street. Is that what you want? Do you want your daughter sleeping under a bridge?" I slowly turned to face her. The moonlight washed over her face, making her look pale and ghostly. The mascara ran down her cheeks like black tears. She looked pathetic. But I had to remind myself that a snake looks pathetic when it is shedding its skin too, but it is still a snake. I looked her in the eye. "You asked me what I want, Jasmine." I said, my voice steady and low. "I will tell you what I wanted. I wanted a daughter who called me on Sundays just to say hello, not just when her rent was due. I wanted a daughter who looked at my grease-stained hands and saw hard work, not embarrassment. I wanted a daughter who would invite me to dinner and pay the check just once, not because I needed the money, but because she wanted to treat her old man." Jasmine opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. "In the last 5 years, Jasmine," I asked, taking a step closer to her, "how many times did you ask me if I had eaten dinner? How many times did you ask me how my arthritis was doing? How many times did you ask me if I was lonely in that big empty house after your mother died?" She blinked, tears caught in her lashes. "I do not know," she whispered. "I do," I said. "0. You never asked. Not once. But do you know what you did ask? You asked if I had sold the land yet. You asked if I had signed the papers yet. You asked if the property value had gone up. You treated me like a vending machine, Jasmine. You punched in the code and you expected cash to come out. And when the machine did not work fast enough, you kicked it. I did not mean to, Dad," she cried. "I was just stressed. I was trying to build a future built on my grave," I said. "You were not building a future. You were digging a hole and you were planning to push me into it." "No," she screamed, shaking her head violently. "That is not true. I love you. I would never hurt you. Blake made me do those things. He twisted my mind. He made me think you were the problem. But I defended you, Dad. I told him he was wrong. I swear." She grabbed my hands again, squeezing them, desperate to make me believe her. "I defended you," she repeated. "I told him you were a good man. You have to believe me. I am your flesh and blood." I looked down at her hands. They were soft, manicured hands, hands that had never done a day of hard labor, hands that I had protected my whole life. "You defended me?" I asked. "Yes," she nodded eagerly. "Yes, always." I reached into my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was an old model, battered and scratched, but the speaker worked perfectly. "I have one more thing to play for you, Jasmine," I said. Her eyes widened. Fear replaced the desperation. "What is that?" she whispered. "It is a recording," I said, "from 3 days ago, standing outside your apartment door. You were talking to Courtney. You were drinking wine. You were celebrating. Do you remember what you were celebrating?" She shook her head, backing away. No, do not play it." I pressed play. The sound was clear in the quiet night. The high-pitched laughter of Courtney, the clinking of glasses, and then Jasmine voice, my daughter voice, cruel and arrogant. "I know he is my dad," Courtney Jasmine voice said from the speaker. "But honestly, he is an embarrassment. He smells like motor oil and cheap soap. I cannot have him showing up at the new house." Jasmine covered her ears. "Stop it," she begged. "Turn it off." I did not turn it off. I turned the volume up. "We found this place called Whispering Pines," the recording continued. "It is basically a warehouse for state cases. It is cheap, it is far away, and they have a strict no visitation policy if you pay extra, which I definitely will." The real Jasmine sank to her knees on the gravel. She curled into a ball, trying to make herself small, trying to hide from the ugliness of her own soul. He has served his purpose. The recording played on relentless and unforgiving. That is what parents are for, right? To be used until they are empty. I am just speeding up the process. Once Blake and I sell the land, I will never have to admit I came from a scrapyard again. I pressed stop. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the silence of a tomb. Jasmine looked up at me. She could not deny it. She could not blame Blake. She could not blame AI. That was her voice. Those were her words. That was her heart exposed and rotting for the world to see. I defended you, I repeated, my voice cold. Is that what you call defense, Jasmine? Putting me in a warehouse, paying extra so you would never have to visit me, wishing I would just disappear so you could pretend you were born a princess. Dad, she whispered, I am sorry. I was stupid. I was awful. Please forgive me. I looked at her. I felt a tear finally roll down my own cheek. It was a hot, angry tear. I forgive you, I said. Her face lit up with hope. Really? Yes, I said. I forgive you for being weak. I forgive you for being greedy. But forgiveness does not mean access. I put the phone back in my pocket. What does that mean? She asked, her voice trembling. It means the ATM is out of order, Jasmine, I said. Permanently. I took a step back. You want to be a Harrington, I said. You want to be high society. Well, welcome to the real world. In the real world, when you spend $50,000 on a party you cannot afford, you pay the bill. In the real world, when you conspire to commit fraud, you face the consequences. And in the real world, when you throw your father in the trash, do not expect him to climb back out and hand you a check. But I have nowhere to go, she sobbed. I have no money. I have no job. Blake accounts are frozen. They will evict me tomorrow. Then you better start looking for a job, I said. I heard the diner on 4th Street is hiring. They need dishwashers. It is honest work. It pays minimum wage. It is enough to rent a room. It is enough to buy food. A dishwasher, she shrieked. I am not a dishwasher. I have a degree in art history. That degree did not teach you how to be a human being, I said. Maybe washing dishes will. I turned around. I walked toward my car. Dad, she screamed, scrambling to her feet. You cannot do this. You are my father. You owe me. You brought me into this world. I stopped. I looked back at her one last time. She was standing in the dark, a silhouette of ruined lace and shattered dreams. I brought you into this world, I said. And I spent 26 years trying to give you the world. But you did not want the world, Jasmine. You just wanted the receipt so you could return it for cash. I opened the car door. I got in. Dad, she yelled, running toward the car. Dad, please. I started the engine. I did not look at her. I put the car in drive. I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw her standing in the middle of the road. She grew smaller and smaller until she was just a speck of white in the darkness. Then I turned a corner, and she was gone. I drove in silence. The road ahead was dark, but my headlights cut through it. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was pain, yes, but it was also relief. The weight was gone. The lie was over. I reached for the radio and turned it on. Soft jazz filled the car. It was the kind of music Lucille used to love. I am sorry, Lucille, I whispered to the empty passenger seat. I tried. I really tried. But sometimes you have to prune the branch to save the tree. I drove toward the city, toward my home, toward a life that was finally mine again. There would be no second chance for Jasmine. Not because I was cruel, but because she had already used up her lifetime supply of chances. She had made her bed in the luxury sheets of the Harrington estate, and now she would have to sleep in it even if the mattress was gone. 6 months is a long time in the business world, but it is an eternity inside a 6-by-8-foot concrete cell. The seasons have changed outside. The leaves have turned from green to gold and fallen to the ground. But for Blake and Victoria Harrington, the world has turned into a permanent shade of gray. The high society pages no longer feature their photos. Instead, their names are now printed on inmate rosters in the state correctional facility. Blake Harrington, who once complained if his steak was slightly overcooked, now eats whatever sloppy gray paste is served on a plastic tray. He used to spend his mornings getting hot towel shaves and manicures. Now he spends his mornings scrubbing the communal showers with a coarse brush while guards scream at him to move faster. The arrogance that defined him has been beaten out of him not by physical force, but by the crushing weight of being nobody. In prison, his last name means nothing. His credit score means nothing. He is just another number in the system. I heard through Anthony that Blake cries at night. He curls up on his thin mattress and sobs for the life he threw away. He tries to tell the other inmates that he used to be a real estate mogul, that he almost owned a $20 million property. They just laugh at him. To them, he is just a soft boy in a hard world. His mother fared no better. Victoria Harrington. The woman who treated waitstaff like furniture now spends her days folding laundry in the prison basement for 12 cents an hour. The harsh detergents have ruined her hands. Her skin is cracked and dry. Her silver hair, which was once dyed and styled to perfection, is now gray and thinning. She has lost weight. Her designer dresses have been replaced by a shapeless orange jumpsuit that hangs off her frame. The warden told me she tries to order the other prisoners around out of habit. She tries to demand better service in the cafeteria. It usually ends with her tray being flipped over. She has learned the hard way that respect is earned, not bought. She is alone. Her friends from the country club never visited. They erased her from their contact lists the moment the handcuffs clicked shut. And then there is Courtney. She managed to avoid prison because she turned state evidence against Blake to save her own skin. But she quickly learned that there are prisons without bars. The video of her mocking my daughter went viral. It was shared millions of times. Every time she walks down the street, people point. They whisper. They take photos. She lost her job at the marketing firm. No company wanted to be associated with the woman who betrayed her best friend at the altar. She was evicted from her trendy apartment because she could not pay the rent. She had to move back in with her parents in a small town 3 states away. She spends her days arguing with strangers in comment sections trying to defend herself, but the internet never forgets. She is marked. She is the girl who stole a husband and lost a life. But the most tragic fall belongs to Jasmine. My daughter wanted to live in a mansion. She wanted to walk on marble floors. Instead, she is walking on grease-stained tiles at a diner called the Rusty Spoon on the edge of the highway. It is the only place that would hire her with no references and a scandal attached to her name. She works the breakfast shift. She wakes up at 4 in the morning. Her feet, which used to be pampered with pedicures, are now swollen and aching from standing for 10 hours a day. She wears a stained pink uniform that smells of bacon grease and old coffee. She serves truck drivers and construction workers. They do not call her princess. They call her sweetheart and yell at her when the eggs are cold. She has to smile and apologize. She has to endure their rude comments for a $2 tip. I drove by there once just to see. I watched through the window. I saw her wiping down a table, her face shiny with sweat. She looked tired. She looked older. The sparkle in her eyes was gone, replaced by the dull, flat look of survival. She lives in a basement apartment in a bad part of town. The landlord is a slumlord who demands cash every week. The walls are thin and she can hear her neighbors fighting all night. She has no car. She takes the bus. She counts her pennies at the grocery store, buying generic noodles and canned vegetables. The bill collectors call her phone 5 times a day. She owes $50,000 to the catering company. She owes legal fees. She owes credit card debt. She is drowning in the consequences of her own choices. Sometimes when the diner is quiet, she stands by the window and looks out at the cars driving by. I wonder if she looks for my truck. I wonder if she fantasizes about me pulling up and saving her. But I never pull in. I keep driving. And as for me, I am driving a lot these days. But I am not driving my old battered pickup truck anymore. I bought a new one. It is a heavy-duty model, jet black, with leather seats and a sound system that plays my jazz music with crystal clarity. It is the only luxury I allowed myself. The day after the wedding, I made a decision. I was done hiding. I was done playing the role of the humble, invisible mechanic. I called a press conference. I walked onto the stage not in a tuxedo, but in a sharp business suit. I announced to the world that Frank Robinson was the owner and CEO of Robinson Logistics. I showed them the architectural plans for the new recycling facility. I showed them the charity foundation I had started in Lucille's name. The reaction was immediate. The same people who used to look through me now lined up to shake my hand. The bankers who laughed at my clothes now beg for a meeting to manage my portfolio. I appeared on the cover of the local business journal. The headline read, "The Titan in Blue Collar." I walked into my office building the next Monday and the security guard saluted me. My employees cheered. They knew I was the one who signed their checks, but now they knew I was also the one who fought for them. I kept the house, the big empty house where Jasmine grew up. But it does not feel empty anymore. I filled it with life. I hosted fundraisers for the orphanage. I invited Mrs. Patterson over for dinner. We sat on the porch drinking iced tea and laughing about the look on Victoria's face when the FBI arrived. It was a good, clean laugh. I still work every day. I still go down to the sorting floor. I still get grease on my hands because that is who I am. But now when I wash my hands, I look in the mirror and I like the man staring back at me. He is not a victim. He is not a doormat. He is a father who did the hardest thing a father can do. He let his child fall so she could learn how to stand. I am respected. I am wealthy. But more importantly, I am at peace. The silence in my life is no longer lonely. It is the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The weeds have been pulled, the garden is clean, and for the first time in years I can finally see the sun. It had been 3 weeks since the wedding catastrophe, and the silence from Jasmine had been absolute. I expected her to show up sooner, honestly. I expected her to come banging on my door the day after her eviction notice was posted, but she stayed away. I heard rumors from Mrs. Patterson that Jasmine was sleeping on a friend's sofa, a friend from college who did not know about the scandal yet. I knew it was only a matter of time before that bridge burned too. Entitlement is a heavy house guest, and eventually everyone gets tired of carrying its luggage. I was sitting in my office at the recycling plant reviewing the quarterly projections. The business was booming. The publicity from the wedding had ironically brought in new contracts. Companies wanted to do business with the man who had outsmarted the corrupt Harringtons. My secretary buzzed me. Her voice sounded hesitant over the intercom. "Mr. Robinson," she said, "there is a young woman here to see you. She says she is your daughter. She does not have an appointment." I looked at the paperwork on my desk. I looked at the picture of Lucille. I took a deep breath. "Send her in," I said. The door opened and Jasmine walked in. She looked different. The arrogance that usually radiated off her like a force field was dampened. She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, not the designer labels she used to flash. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired. There were dark circles under her eyes that makeup could not hide. For a second, my heart softened. I wanted to ask her if she was eating. I wanted to ask her if she was warm enough. But then she sat down. She did not ask if she could sit. She just flopped into the leather chair opposite my desk and looked at me. And in that look, I saw it. The spark was still there. The calculation. She was not here to apologize. She was here to negotiate. "Hi, Dad," she said. "Hello, Jasmine," I replied. I closed the file I was reading. "How are you?" She let out a dramatic sigh. "How do you think I am?" "My life is a mess. Blake is going to be in jail for 10 years. Victoria is facing 5. And me. I am the laughingstock of the city. I cannot even go to the grocery store without people staring at me." I waited. I knew the pitch was coming. "But I am trying to move forward," she continued, leaning forward slightly. "I realized you were right, Dad. About everything. Blake was a monster. I was blinded by love. I see that now." She paused, waiting for me to validate her. I stayed silent. "Anyway," she said, rushing to fill the void. "I have a plan. I want to start over. A fresh start. New city. New name, maybe. I want to go to design school in New York. I think I have a real talent for it." "New York," I repeated. "That is an expensive city, Jasmine." "I know," she said, nodding eagerly. "That is why I'm here. I need a loan." "Not a handout, Dad. A loan. I will pay you back. I just need enough for tuition and an apartment and maybe a few months of living expenses. Say $50,000. That is nothing to you now. You are rich." I looked at her. She had learned nothing. She was standing in the wreckage of a house she burned down and asking for money to build a penthouse on top of the ashes. She still thought the solution to every problem was a check. She still thought that money was a magic wand that could wave away responsibility. I opened my desk drawer. Inside, I had prepared an envelope. I knew this day would come. I knew exactly what she would ask for. I pulled out the thick, cream-colored envelope. It looked official. It looked heavy. Jasmine's eyes locked onto it. Her pupils dilated. She licked her lips. It was a predatory reaction. She saw the paper and she smelled the ink of a check. She thought she had won. She thought that all she had to do was say the words "I was wrong" and the bank vault would open again. "Is that it?" she asked, her voice trembling with excitement. I placed the envelope on the desk. I slid it across the mahogany surface until it rested in front of her. "This is your fresh start, Jasmine," I said. "This is the most valuable thing I can give you." She grabbed the envelope. Her hands were shaking. She ripped it open, tearing the expensive paper in her haste. She reached inside, expecting to find a cashier check or a bank transfer authorization. She pulled out the single sheet of paper. She stared at it. She frowned. She turned it over, looking for the check that must be hidden behind it. There was nothing else. "What is this?" she whispered. She looked at the document. It was not a check. It was a standard employment application form for Robinson Logistics. At the top, stamped in red ink, was the position title: General Laborer, Level 1, Sorting Floor. She looked up at me. Her face twisted in confusion and disgust. "A job application," she said. "You gave me a job application. Read the details, Jasmine," I said. She read out loud, her voice dripping with venom. "Starting salary, minimum wage. Duties include manual sorting of recyclable materials, operating conveyor belt machinery, and general facility cleaning. Shift hours 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. She threw the paper onto the desk. It slid across the polished wood and landed near my hand. "Is this a joke?" she demanded. "You want me to work here?" "In the trash." "It is not trash, Jasmine," I corrected her. "It is material. It is the raw stuff of the world. And yes, I want you to work here." "Why?" she screamed, standing up. "You have millions. You could write me a check right now and not even feel it. Why do you want to humiliate me?" I stood up too. I leaned over the desk. "Because you do not know the value of $1, Jasmine," I said, my voice rising. "You think money is something you get for being pretty. You think money is something you get for marrying the right last name. You have never earned a dime in your life. You have never felt the satisfaction of aching muscles after a long shift. You have never looked at a paycheck and known that it represents your own sweat and your own time." I picked up the application. "This job is not a humiliation," I said. "This job is an honor. This is how I started. I stood on that line for 12 hours a day, separating copper from steel. I came home smelling like rust and oil, and I saved every penny. That money was clean, Jasmine. It was mine. Nobody could take it away from me because I traded my life for it." I held the paper out to her again. "You want a fresh start," I said. "This is it. You start at the bottom. You learn the business. You learn respect. If you work hard, if you show up on time, if you treat the other workers with dignity, then in 6 months we can talk about a promotion. We can talk about design school. But not before." Jasmine stared at the paper as if it were contaminated. Her face was red with rage. "I am not a garbage man," she hissed. "I am a Harrington." "Well, I was a Harrington. I am better than this." "You are not better than this," I said. "You are unemployed, you are in debt, and you are alone. The people working on that floor are feeding their families. They are honest. They are loyal. Right now they are 10 times the person you are." She looked at me with pure hatred. It was the look of a child who has been told no for the first time and cannot process the reality of it. "You are cruel," she said. "You are a bitter old man enjoying his power. You just want to see me suffer." "I want to see you grow," I said. "But you cannot grow if you never touch the dirt." She snatched her purse from the chair. "I do not need your charity," she spat. "And I definitely do not need your garbage job. I will find my own way. I will find someone who appreciates me." She turned and marched toward the door. She held her head high, trying to salvage some scrap of dignity, but I could see the panic in her shoulders. She had played her last card, and it had been trumped. "Jasmine," I called out. She stopped, hand on the doorknob. She did not turn around. "The offer stands," I said. "The shift starts at 6 a.m. Dawn not be late." She slammed the door. The sound echoed through the office. The glass in the frames rattled. I sat back down. I picked up the application form from the desk. I smoothed out the wrinkles she had made. I placed it in the top drawer. I knew she would not be there at 6 a.m. Not tomorrow. Maybe not next week. She was still looking for the easy way out. She was still looking for another Blake, another victim, another shortcut. But the world is a hard teacher. Eventually she would run out of shortcuts. Eventually she would get hungry enough. And when that day came when she was truly ready to work, the application would be waiting. I swiveled my chair around to look out the window. I could see the sorting floor down below. I saw the workers in their orange vests moving with rhythm and purpose. I saw the conveyor belts carrying mountains of discarded metal, transforming waste into value. "It takes a lot of heat to melt down scrap," I whispered to myself. "And it takes a lot of pressure to make a diamond." Jasmine was in the furnace now. I just hoped she would not burn to ash. I hoped she would come out steel. I went back to work. There were invoices to sign. There were people counting on me. I had an empire to run. and for the first time in my life I was running it without the heavy weight of an ungrateful child on my back. I was free, and maybe, just maybe, one day she would be too. The silence in my house used to be a heavy thing. It used to hang in the corners like cobwebs catching dust and memories of better days. After Lucille died, I spent years walking through these empty rooms listening to the echo of my own footsteps. I told myself that loneliness was just the price of being strong. I told myself that a man does not need company, he only needs work. But I was wrong. Work keeps your hands busy, but it does not warm your heart. Now on Sunday afternoons, my house smells of cinnamon and baked apples. It smells of life. Mrs. Patterson comes over around 2:00. She does not knock anymore. She just walks in carrying a Tupperware container of her famous pecan pie or a pot of collard greens. We sit on the back porch in the rocking chairs I built with my own hands. We watch the sun move across the yard. We watch the squirrels chase each other up the oak trees. We do not talk about business. We do not talk about the Harringtons. We do not talk about the wedding that almost ruined my life. We talk about jazz. Mrs. Patterson knows more about Thelonious Monk than I do, and she loves to prove it. We talk about the garden. She tells me I am overwatering the hydrangeas, and I tell her she is too bossy, and we both laugh. It is a good, clean laugh. It comes from the belly. It is the laughter of two people who have seen the ugliness of the world and decided to focus on the beauty instead. Sometimes we just sit in silence. But it is not the heavy silence of before. It is a comfortable silence. It is the feeling of having someone beside you who knows your story without you having to say a word. Mrs. Patterson saw me at my lowest point. She saw me standing in her shop in my underwear, shaking with rage. She handed me the suit that became my armor. She stood by me when my own flesh and blood tried to sell me for parts. She is more than a friend. She is a witness. And in this life, having a witness who sees the truth of who you are is the greatest luxury of all. Last week she reached over and took my hand. Her hand is rough from years of sewing, just like mine is rough from years of mechanics. It was not a romantic gesture in the way young people think of romance with fireworks and drama. It was steady. It was warm. It was an anchor. "Frank," she said, "you did good." I looked at her and I knew she was right. I did good. I protected what mattered, and in doing so I made space for this peace to enter my life. I used to think I was saving the land for Jasmine, but maybe all along I was saving it for this, for Sunday afternoons, for pecan pie, for the quiet dignity of growing old with someone who respects you. I spend a lot of time thinking about that word family. It is a dangerous word. It is a word that people use as a weapon. They wave it around to justify greed. They use it to demand loyalty that they have not earned. They say blood is thicker than water, as if biology is a binding contract that can never be broken. But I have learned the hard way that blood is just biology. It is just cells and DNA. It does not carry love. It does not carry character. You can share blood with a shark, but that does not mean it will not bite you. Jasmine is my blood. I cannot change that. I see my nose on her face. I see her mother's smile in her expressions. But she is not my family. Not anymore. She forfeited that title the moment she decided I was a commodity instead of a father. A child is not an investment strategy. A parent is not an insurance policy. Family is not a noun. It is a verb. It is something you do. You show up. You tell the truth. You care when it is inconvenient. You give without expecting a return. I look at the people in my life now. Anthony, my lawyer, who fought for me like a pit bull. The foreman at my plant who has worked for me for 20 years and sends me a Christmas card every single December. Mrs. Patterson, who closed her shop early just to help me fit a suit. These people do not share my DNA, but they share my values. They share my respect. They are my family. It is a hard lesson to learn. It breaks your heart to learn it. You want to believe that the people you raise will grow up to be good. You want to believe that your love is enough to shape them. But sometimes the wood is rotten from the inside and no amount of polishing will fix it. Sometimes you have to cut the branch to save the tree. I do not hate Jasmine. Hate takes too much energy. I just feel a distant pity for her. She is wandering through the world looking for happiness in bank accounts and status symbols. She will never find it there. She will never know the feeling I have right now sitting on this porch. She will never know the peace of having nothing to hide. I hope one day she wakes up. I hope one day she understands. But I cannot wait for her. I spent too many years waiting. I spent too many years holding my breath hoping she would change. I am breathing now. I am filling my lungs with the air of freedom, and I am not going to waste a single breath on regret. The sun is starting to dip below the tree line, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. It is time to go. I stand up and stretch. My knees creak a little, but they are strong. I walk down the porch steps to the driveway. My new truck is parked there, gleaming black in the twilight. It is a beast of a machine, powerful and reliable. It is a lot like me. I open the driver door and climb in. The leather smells new and rich. I look in the rearview mirror. I see the house. It looks warm. It looks safe. It is no longer a monument to the past. It is a home for the present. I reach back and tap the leather bag sitting on the back seat. It is a set of golf clubs, top of the line, titanium driver's custom grips. They cost more than my first car. I have never played a round of golf in my life. I do not even know the rules. But I bought them yesterday. Why? Because I can. Because for 40 years I told myself I could not have nice things. I told myself I had to save every penny for Jasmine. I told myself a mechanic does not belong on a golf course. Well, Frank Robinson, the mechanic, is retired. Frank Robinson, the CEO, is going to the driving range. I might be terrible at it. I might miss the ball every time. I might look ridiculous. But I am going to swing that club with a smile on my face. I start the engine. The truck roars to life, a deep, satisfying rumble. I roll down the window and let the evening breeze hit my face. I put the truck in gear. I do not look back at the empty road behind me. I look forward at the horizon where the sun is setting. It is a beautiful ending to the day, but more importantly, it is the promise of a bright morning tomorrow. My name is Frank Robinson. I am a father who survived. I am a man who stood tall. And as I drive toward the city lights, I realize something that makes me smile. The best years of my life are not behind me. They are just beginning. I press the gas pedal. The truck surges forward. I am moving. I am living. I am free. Through this fire, I learned that unconditional love should never mean unconditional tolerance. I spent years thinking that being a good father meant giving my daughter everything she wanted, but I realized I was only feeding a hunger that could never be satisfied. We teach people how to treat us, and for too long I taught Jasmine that I was second class. No more. I have learned that dignity is not a negotiation, and self-respect is the only currency that really matters. You can be a doormat, or you can be a door, but you cannot be both. If you believe that respect must be earned regardless of bloodline, hit that like button and share this story. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to cut off a family member to save your own peace? I will be reading your stories. Until next time, keep your head high and your boundaries strong.